Good morning, everyone. Good morning. So they're still not there. Still not in the room. There's not many updates as to why, just technical issues. It appears that one reporter is saying that it seems like there might be a general courthouse problem. Not sure, but she thinks that oh, I'm glad you got a notification, Crystal. She's noticed that it looks like other courtrooms might be having the same problem. I've been, I've been refreshing every 2 seconds on the Twitter feeds of the reporters in the room. And the reporters, well, what I mean is reporters in the courthouse. And the reporters in the courthouse seem to be just as frustrated and confused as we are. So I decided what I was going to do because, hello, Ms. Milky the Clown One. um, uh, Crystal, is Lori Day a reporter? I don't know who Lori Day is. Is Lori Day a reporter? Because I mean, it's not that I don't believe Lori Day, but I want to find out how they would know it's going to be 12 because no one else is reporting that. Because what I was thinking I would do is she's just there. Okay. But how would she know? Because I feel like the reporters that are there would have posted that, but I'm looking. I'm just wondering, is she guessing she's in the hallway? Okay. But I'm wondering if that's from information from the actual court, or is it that they are surmising that? You know what I mean? Um, yeah, that's the thing. What I decided to do is go ahead and go live, and if they don't start by 10 my, my time, which is in about 40 minutes, um we'll sit here and wrap until 10 my time. Court is not in session yet, and we don't know why, Running Bear. So we're just sitting here chatting until they come in. I've been I've been hounding the Twitter feeds of the reporters that are there. And they just keep saying that there are technical issues. The last update, it was supposed to start at 10 their time, and then it didn't start at 10 their time. It is 10:23 their time. So I did pull some pictures that were taken while Chad was getting his sentence. These are definitely more clear than we were able to see of him. I mean, from that Zoom view, you can't see this much detail. It is kind of scary how blank his expression is. Don't you think it's just kind of scary that he could sit there? It's almost like he's in a whole other place. Okay, Johnny, do you want me to show it to the class? so cute. uh, hold on a moment. Oh, isn't that weird though? How this man has just been told he's guilty of 3 murders. He's just been called a murderer, and that's his look. Yeah, yeah. Our word for it is dissociating. His word for it is being in the portal, or going beyond the veil or whatever. Right. Um, and here's a picture of the prosecuting team. The 4 in front are the ones that we've seen in court doing the, questioning. That's Rob Wood on the left. No, I'm sorry, on the right, on our right, and then Lindsay and Ingrid and Mr. Wixom. So it's a big team. That's the team that Pryor was up against. I don't know why he thought I don't know why he thought he was going to be able to yeah, exactly. Which one of these people, Rachel, did every one single one of these people miss that date? Every single one of them, and then it was somebody on Judge Boyce's staff that caught the date issue. I mean, so, and Johnny wants us to know that Zorro is waiting. Zorro is waiting. Very impatient. We all look like Zorro looks like right now. Zorro's like, come on, get on with it. Let's go. Ruff. Oh, oh, look what I did to my dog. That was my fault. You hear my dog barking? It was because I tried to make Zorro bark. It's funny because he ran to the door. Steve, he ran to the door to see what's there because I barked, right? And there's nobody there, so he's looking back at me like sorry. And he's looking back at me like there's nothing here. Why did you bark, Mom? I think he's I think he's gonna be hi KK's way. I think he's gonna be okay. Let me see if there are any Twitter updates. Hold on. He does sound like a German Shepherd running bear, but he is a sweet golden doodle. He is like a sweet, very gentle, very, very tender and loving golden doodle who loves everybody. He just has this huge bark. It sometimes scares me. So hold on, let me look at Twitter. Yeah, it appears that everybody's in the dark. Everybody is in the dark as to why they haven't started yet. I feel bad for the jury because I bet they're ready to go. I bet they are ready to go. Yeah, I was so happy. I am so happy with my golden doodle. He is 7 years old now and he's amazing. The sweetest, my best friend. Hello, language of horses. Yeah, let's hope so, Rachel. So your dog is discriminatory against golden retrievers, Teacup Kraken? Oh my gosh. That's weird. I've never heard of dogs that don't like a particular type of dog. I've heard of dogs that don't like certain colors of dogs or certain like sizes of dogs, like big dogs that don't like small dogs that don't like big dogs, things like that. But never heard of a specific breed not being liked. Yeah, Johnny. So I feel lucky. My Steve loves other dogs. He loves other dogs. A guy I dated for a while, his dog did not like other dogs, and it was hard. It was hard to, take him out and take her out and walk her and stuff like that and be around other dogs. I think, that she did end up getting better with dogs when he started doing a service that involved a lot of dogs, and he kind of got used to it. The dog got used to it and wasn't mean to the other dogs. So it might be a socialization thing. I don't know. But at first, oh, scared of men. Yeah, I did. I had a dog that was scared of men once a long time ago. I forget, was it my dog? I forget who. I remember there's a dog in my life that was scared of men. So, let me see. Let me see if there's any updates. Okay. Looks like they're going to start soon. It does look like they're going to start soon. Everybody's in the courtroom. He also, Teacup says he also doesn't like skateboards. Yes, things that make people move fast with wheels, dogs can be very wary of. So they are, here we are. They have
Thank
not
you.
brought
Please be seated.
They have not brought the jury in yet. So finally, we're finally here. Woo! I'm glad we hung in there.
All right, Mr. Bailiff, if you'd like to have our jurors brought in, please.
Chad has the red tie look today. Is that a message? Is he sending a message with the red tie like, this is my mean color? He's going to try to get it to come off of his neck and strangle everybody in the room. It is amazing to me how emotionless he has been this entire time. You think he's showing support to Trump with his red tie? You think that's what it is, Running Bear? Yeah, it does track. It does definitely track that he can sit there and be totally emotionless. I guess for someone like me who is so...
I'm sorry, we do need to take up one matter outside the presence of the jurors. If
Oh
they're
my
ready,
God.
it will take a few moments. Apologies.
Oh my God. Please don't go off the record though, Judge. What is
Okay,
that?
we are going to go on the record on case CR 22211623, State of Idaho versus Chad Guy Daybell. We began a special sentencing proceeding under Idaho's death penalty statute yesterday. At the conclusion of the return of a verdict in this case, the court gave some preliminary instruction to the jurors. They convened for the evening. We're starting again with that hearing today on this special sentencing proceeding. The court has been advised by defense counsel of an intent to potentially not present mitigation. And I have in a closed
Oh,
sealed hearing inquired with counsel on a proffer to cover that. However, I also want to go through and determine whether or not there's a knowing and voluntary waiver of that right on the record and do that outside the presence of the jurors. So, Mr. Daybell, let me just outline your rights here for you briefly. In this special sentencing proceeding, you do have the right to both present mitigation and also a right of allocution that can be exercised at the conclusion of the proceeding before the jury deliberates. There are a couple of instructions that would be provided to the jurors. I'll read an instruction called mitigation, and it reads as follows. A mitigating factor is any fact or circumstance relating to the crime or to the defendant's state of mind or condition at the time of the crime or to his character, background, or record that tends to suggest that a sentence other than death should be imposed. A mitigating factor does not have to constitute a defense, excuse, or justification for the crime, nor does it even have to reduce the degree of the defendant's blame for the crime. My instructions given at the end of the trial phase that you are not to allow sympathy for the defendant to enter your deliberations do not apply at this sentencing phase. Mitigating factors may include any fact or circumstance that inspires sympathy, compassion, or mercy for the defendant. Evidence supporting the existence of a mitigating factor may come from the trial phase or this sentencing phase, whether produced by the defendant or the state. One other instruction that will be given is the defendant's right to allocution, and that reads, the defendant has the right to personally address you. This is called the right of allocution. Allocution is not made under oath and not subject to cross-examination. The law provides that these statements are something that the defendant is allowed to present to you as mitigation. You may consider these statements in your deliberations. So, Mr. Pryor, I've discussed this with you on the record already, but you have explained the right of mitigation and allocution to your client. Is that correct?
I have, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Daybell, the purpose of these rights is to potentially present evidence to the jury that could result in them finding that the death penalty should not be imposed in your case. Do you understand that?
I do.
All right, and I'm also advised then that you do not intend to, despite the preparation of mitigation from your attorney, you don't intend to present that evidence at this hearing. Is that your choice?
That is my choice.
Has anyone coerced or pressured you personally to make that choice?
No.
And do you feel like you're thinking clearly this morning as you make that choice?
Yes.
Okay, well, that is your right, Mr. Daybell. So thank you for putting that on the record for the court before we brought the jurors in. At this time, then, we are going to proceed with the remainder of this special sentencing proceeding, and we'll have the jurors brought into the courtroom, please.
wow. It's like he's being a martyr, you guys. It's like he's being a martyr. He's saying, go ahead, convince this jury that I should get the death penalty. I'm not going to fight you. That may have been the hold up. Good question, Johnny. And I think the way he answered those questions were very martyr-like. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking language. He's he's like, I'm guilty. You called me guilty. Send me to the. It's like he's acting like a martyr.
All right, please.
He's like, oh, well, I guess, yeah, that's right, Rachel. Well, I guess I'm going to have to be the one to die for that. All these other people died. I'm going to have to die too. Alex had to die. It's not really dying in our belief. That doesn't mean we're really dying. We're going to all meet up in heaven. The way he answered those questions.
Here's our President Counter for you, Honor.
Okay, thank you. Please be seated.
Was like he was a martyr. I know. I have not been convinced of this. Nobody's talked to me.
All right. Good morning, everyone. We're on the record on KCR 22-21-1623, State of Idaho versus Chat Guy Daybell. I understand we are now on the record with the public here and the jurors much later than anticipated, but the court's been taking up several administrative matters to get to this point. At this time, then, the court's intent is to read some additional instructions to the jurors before any opening statements are made. Is the state prepared to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yep,
And let me
agreed.
just inquire, will the
Act
state
like a
intend to make an opening
martyr.
statement
Maybe
for this
they'll change
procedure?
their mind. Maybe
Yes, Your
they'll
Honor.
give me the
Will that
death
be you, Ms. Blake?
penalty.
Will be Mr. Wood.
Mr. Wood, thank you. Is the defense prepared to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. And does the defense intend an opening statement?
Yes, Judge, and that will be me.
Thank you, Mr. Pryor. All right. At this time then, ladies and gentlemen of the
Statement.
jury, I am going to read you some additional instructions. I'll note that you'll get copies of these to take with you as you deliberate. I read you an instruction yesterday, which was instruction number 3, and the way I read the instruction yesterday had an error in it. So that's been corrected. I'm going to reread it, and the one you get with you will have the correct language. So these instructions are not in any particular order, but they'll come to you in a packet. And again, the order doesn't necessarily matter, but you'll receive each of these. So the first instruction I'm going to read you this morning is as follows. The state of Idaho is seeking the death penalty in this case, alleging aggravating circumstances exist under Idaho law that may allow the death penalty to be imposed. The statutory aggravating circumstances are simply allegations. They are not evidence. You should not be influenced or prejudiced for or against the defendant because the state is seeking the death penalty. The state has alleged the following statutory aggravating circumstances. A, the murder of Tylee Ryan was committed for remuneration, or the defendant employed another to commit the murder for remuneration or the promise of remuneration. B, the murder of Joshua Jackson, hereinafter J.J. Vallow, was committed for remuneration, or the defendant employed another to commit the murder for remuneration or the promise of remuneration. C, the murder of Tamara, hereinafter Tammy Daybell, was committed for remuneration, or the defendant employed another to commit the murder for remuneration or the promise of remuneration. D, the murder of Tylee Ryan was especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel, manifesting exceptional depravity. E, the murder of J.J. Vallow was especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel, manifesting exceptional depravity. F, the murder of Tammy Daybell was especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel, manifesting exceptional depravity. G, by the murder or circumstances surrounding their commission, the defendant exhibited utter disregard for human life. H, the defendant, by his conduct, whether such conduct was before, during, or after the commission of the murders at hand, has exhibited a propensity to commit murder, which will probably constitute a continuing threat to society. If, after considering all the evidence, you unanimously find that one or more of the aggravating circumstances exists beyond a reasonable doubt, you must indicate on the special verdict form by specifically stating what aggravating circumstances or circumstance exists. If, after looking At all the evidence, you unanimously find that there is a reasonable doubt about the existence of a statutory aggravating circumstance, or you cannot unanimously agree on the existence of a statutory aggravating circumstance, you must indicate on the special verdict form that the state has not proven the aggravating circumstance. You must indicate this finding by checking the appropriate line next to such aggravating circumstance or circumstances on the verdict form. Your presiding juror must sign the verdict form. Next instruction. It is presumed that no statutory aggravating circumstance exists in this case. This presumption remains throughout the sentencing phase and during your deliberations. The state has the burden of proving the existence of a statutory aggravating circumstance, and that burden remains on the state throughout the sentencing phase. The defendant is not required to prove the absence of any aggravating circumstance, nor is the defendant required to produce any evidence at all. The state must prove the existence of a statutory aggravating circumstance beyond a reasonable doubt. A reasonable doubt is not a mere possible or imaginary doubt. It is a doubt based on reason and common sense. It may arise from a careful and impartial consideration of all the evidence or from lack of evidence. If after careful and impartial consideration of all the evidence, you are not convinced beyond a reasonable doubt about a statutory aggravating circumstance, it is your duty to find that a statutory aggravating circumstance has not been proven. On the other hand, if after careful and impartial consideration of all the evidence, you are convinced beyond a reasonable doubt about a statutory aggravating circumstance, it is your duty to find that a statutory aggravating circumstance has been proven. Next instruction. A mitigating factor is any fact or circumstance relating to the crime or to the defendant's state of mind or condition at the time of the crime, or to his character, background, or record that tends to suggest that a sentence other than death should be imposed. A mitigating factor does not have to constitute a defense, excuse, or justification for the crime, nor does it even have to reduce the degree of the defendant's blame for the crime. My instructions given at the end of the trial phase were that you are not allowed to have sympathy for the defendant or to enter that into your deliberations, and that does not apply at this sentencing phase. Mitigating factors may include any fact or circumstance that inspires sympathy, compassion, or mercy for the defendant. Evidence supporting the existence of a mitigating factor may come from the trial phase or this sentencing phase, whether produced by the defendant or the state. Next instruction, a defendant has a constitutional right not to be compelled to testify. The decision whether to testify is left to the defendant, acting with the advice and assistance of the defendant's lawyer. You must not draw any inference of guilt from the fact that the defendant did not testify during the guilt phase of the trial or during the sentencing phase, nor should this fact be discussed by you or enter into your deliberations in any way. The next instruction, victims have the right to personally address you by making a victim impact statement, which is a statement concerning the victim's personal characteristics and the emotional impact of the murder. A victim impact statement is not made under oath and is not subject to cross-examination. A victim may not make any statements that are characterizations or opinions about the crime, the defendant, or the appropriate sentence, and you should disregard any such comments you may otherwise consider victim impact statements in your deliberations. And my final instruction before we start with the opening arguments is instruction number 7. The defendant has the right to personally address you. This is called the right of allocution. Allocution is not made under oath and is not subject to cross-examination. The law provides that these statements are something that the defendant is allowed to present to you as mitigation. You may consider these statements in your deliberations. All right, that concludes the court's preliminary instructions. At this time, Mr. Wood, I understand you'll be making an opening statement for the state.
Yes, Your Honor. May I approach the jury, and is there a microphone we can use?
Yeah, we'll get you a wireless mic.
So just to be clear, what they have basically said is Chad's side, the defense is not putting on any evidence,
Ladies and gentlemen,
mitigation evidence.
when we first met, during the jury selection process. We spoke with you about what could happen if we got to this phase of the trial. And we spoke with you about some of your thoughts and feelings about if we got to this phase. And we're here. And in that earlier discussion, we talked with you about what happens if a defendant is convicted of first-degree murder or conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. And we talked with you about some of your feelings and your thoughts on that. The discussion we had involved the jury questionnaires that you filled out. And those questionnaires in our conversations dealt with acknowledging that murder in and of itself is not sufficient for the death penalty. That there has to be something else beyond a finding of guilt if you are to impose the death penalty. And the thing that has to be proven to you beyond a reasonable doubt and beyond that finding of guilt, conspiracy to commit murder, are these aggravating circumstances or aggravating factors the judge just mentioned. And we have alleged in this case, in a document that was filed a long time ago, there are multiple aggravating factors that we are going to ask you to find. And the judge read those to you. I'll go back over them in just a moment. In considering those factors, however, we don't have to start all over again. Yesterday, the court read you an instruction that says you may consider and you shall consider all of the evidence presented so far. And so you have to consider everything that you considered in coming to your verdict on the charges of murder and conspiracy to commit murder. We will not be presenting additional evidence to you in this hearing. However, you will hear from multiple victims in this case. Again, you are entitled to consider everything that has been proven to you beyond a reasonable doubt so far. And the judge read these, but I'm going to read them one more time. These are the aggravators that we are going to ask you to find exist beyond a reasonable doubt. The murder of Tylee Ryan was committed for remuneration. Murder of J.J. Vallow was committed for remuneration. The murder of Tammy Daybell was committed for remuneration. The murder of Tylee Ryan was especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel, manifesting exceptional depravity. The murder of J.J. Vallow was especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel, manifesting exceptional depravity. The murder of Tammy Daybell was especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel, manifesting exceptional depravity. That by these murders or circumstances surrounding their commission, that this defendant exhibited utter disregard for human life. That the defendant, by his conduct, whether such conduct was before, during, or after the commission of the murders at hand, has exhibited a propensity to commit murder, which will probably constitute a continuing threat to society. Again, we're going to ask you to make these findings based on the evidence that's already been presented in this case and anything you hear today. And so going forward, as the judge told you, the trial will work like this. If you decide that the state has proven one or more of those aggravators beyond a reasonable doubt, this case then goes back to you. And it is your decision whether one or more of these aggravators has been proven. And if it has, then you must decide if under these circumstances, imposition of the death penalty would be just or unjust. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wood. That concludes the opening statement from the state. Mr. Pryor, if you'd like to present an opening statement on behalf of your client, you may do so at this time.
Just once more, Judge, may I approach the well?
Yes. Yeah, we're going to adjust a camera as well first. Thank you, Mr. Pryor.
Good. They're going to adjust the camera so we can actually see the person speaking. So I just see him not wanting to fight, being a martyr, it's being somewhat manipulative. Like, oh, feel sorry for me. Maybe they won't give me the death penalty if I don't fight. They'll see me as a martyr. That's how I see it. It would be nice if it also meant that he's not going to file appeals as well. You know, it would be nice for us to be these Zoom views are rough, man. You can't see much. You really can't see much. But even if we were able to see a lot on Chad, he is so emotionless and expressionless. It is concerning. Hey, Sparkles. Oh, I'm sorry you don't feel well. Yeah, I don't feel well either. Appears to be going around. So it was Ervil LeBaron. If you haven't seen the HBO documentary about the massacre of the Mormons
Thank you.
in Mexico, that was part of Ervil LeBaron's family. They were like descendants to Ervil LeBaron's family. Ervil LeBaron was the first person who coined the term Church of the Firstborn. And
Go
that
ahead, Mr. Pryor. Yes.
and Church of the Firstborn is the name that Chad gave to his.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You know, there's a saying that says you can define someone about who they are now and in the future by what they've done in the past. And only a unusual trajectory or an unusual or startling event can change that trajectory. And I want to talk to you a little bit about Chad Daybell. I want to talk to you a little bit about Sheila Daybell taking the stand and talking about this quiet, reserved, shy
Quiet,
young
reserved,
man
shy. This poor man.
growing up in Springville, Utah.
Listen to his quiet voice.
Springville's a town outside of Salt Lake City, about 50 miles south of Salt Lake City. Chad growing up there was a town of about 15,000 people.
Mr. Pryor, I really much apologize. We're barely picking you up on the mic. I don't know if we want to maybe swap mics
Or maybe just talk louder like you usually do. He's speaking in his defeated whisper voice.
all right. Thank you, Mr. Pryor. Apologies.
Skill with electronics is showing and has shown throughout this, I guess, correct?
Yeah, it's all your fault, Pryor.
Springville, Utah, small town, was at the time. I understand now it's 50,000 people. Chad growing up in this small town, quiet, shy, reserved, town of faith, town of religion, grew up in that. We heard Jason William talk about that tight-knit community. Maybe everybody knew each other. And then Chad goes on his mission. I don't know very much. You've gathered that. I don't know very much about the LDS faith. Goes off on a mission, comes back. This is not a mission where you gain worldly experience. It's not a mission where you gain insight into all of the unusual things or the challenges that people have in society. Things that many of us experience who maybe grow up in larger metropolitan areas or maybe even big cities or other parts of the country where you get an opportunity to experience other things. This is small town living. And he meets Tammy Douglas, and they get married. And they're married for 29 years. And by anybody's definition, anyone's definition, Tammy and Chad raised 5 wonderful children, 5 beautiful children, very deep in their faith, very deep in their commitment to family. And we can say maybe Tammy was the driving force in this. Tammy was the glue that created these wonderful children. But it doesn't just take one parent to do that. You don't raise 5 wonderful children, 5 amazing children with just one parent's input. It takes 2 parents to do that. It does take 2 parents to do that. And they did that, much like they shared in the Springfield Publishing Company together. They did all of those things together and built this life. And Chad wrote these books. And again, I told you before, you don't have to agree with what he wrote about, but he wrote books about things that interest him. And Jason William, Steve Schultz, Emma. Jason talked about Chad, and Steve Schultz talked about Chad, deeply involved with the Boy Scouts, deeply involved with his church, a member, a secretary to, and I cannot remember the words, and I will hack him if I say that, but deeply involved with the integral part of his church and his belief. And as Jason William talked about it, he said, remember this when he said, December, Christmas time, something changed. Something changed. What changed in December? Chad got this trajectory that was changing his trajectory. You can judge someone by their past and predict how they're going to be in the future, unless there's an interjecting trajectory that maybe changes the plan. And that trajectory that bomb that came into his life was a woman who previously had been married 4 times. And that bomb brought chaos to Chad Daybell's life.
Oh,
And this worldly man,
it was a
not a
bomb.
worldly man, no experience, the only girlfriend, the only woman, 29 years, from the mission to marriage to 5 kids. He doesn't have a lot of experience dealing with relationships, dealing with how to interact with people, maybe being manipulated. And we can argue all day long. But when it comes to personal relationships, he wasn't a worldly man. And on the other hand, the trajectory that's coming through, the trajectory that's flying into this 29-year marriage is a woman who didn't have 1, 2, 3, 4 marriages. That's worldly experience.
This
That's a
isn't
lot of things.
mitigation. This is deflection.
There's a lot of things going on there. And then it all changes. The amplification of these religious beliefs, these crazy thoughts, this crazy trail of things. And you've made your decision, and I'm not going to go back on that. But look at where he was. And in Jason Williams' own words, Christmas 2018, what changed? What caused this change? We know what caused the change. You've seen all the evidence. And when I went through the voir dire process with you, I used an expression, and some of you may remember this. I don't know if I used it with all of you. I said, everything that glitters is not gold. Lori Vallow glittered. She was not gold. She was the trajectory that changed the plan. You don't go back on 29 years of marriage with nothing as far as a speeding ticket. Raising 5 wonderful children, that takes 2 parents to do that. And then this trajectory comes in and chaos hits, and all of these things start cascading. And this thing becomes very complicated and difficult, easy. And this small town boy from Springville, Utah, who's residing on a farm with his wife and his family close by in a wonderful community of Rexburg, has this bomb dropped. Suddenly chaos ensues. We have to look back at that, because when you start talking about how do you predict the future, you go back looking at what the past was, and you examine what Chad Daybell's past was prior to the bomb being dropped, the Lori Vallow bomb being dropped on Chad Daybell's life, and suddenly all of this stuff changing. And you evaluate that and you look back and say, is this a person?
How insulting.
If it wasn't for
How
that trajectory
insulting
coming in
to
and changing the
intelligence.
path, is this where we would be going? It's not where we'd be going. Path's changed. But you judge what's capable in the future by what you've seen him do with his family, his friends, and this small knit community of Springville, Utah, and raising these 5 absolutely wonderful children. Thank you.
Yep, that's how it
All right,
appears.
that'll conclude the opening statements. At this point of the proceedings, then, the state is entitled to put on evidence in support of aggravating factors. Does the state intend to put on any evidence in support of aggravating factors?
No, Your Honor.
All right, is the defense going to put on any evidence in support of mitigation, Mr. Pryor?
No, Judge.
All right, at this time, the next stage of these proceedings then would be for the state to introduce any victim impact statements it may have. Is the state going to do that?
Yes, Your Honor.
Very well, you can commence with victim statements. The court would note they are governed by statute, somewhat limited in scope, and I believe counsel has tailored these to comport with the statute. So with that in mind, Ms. Blake, if you'd like to call in order your first impact statement victim.
The state would call Ron Douglas.
Very well.
So I have a feeling that Pryor was not getting good feedback from the jury as he was standing there in front of them talking. So he ended quickly. He ended quicker than he wanted to. Like he was going into his story and then he wrapped it up.
Okay, if you'll give us just a moment, we're making sure the cameras are situated so that they are not recording victims in this case.
Look at that, the camera walking.
I'm also going to note and reiterate that instruction. These statements are not under oath, nor are they subject to cross-examination. So, Ms. Blake, once you're ready, you can elicit any statement Mr. Douglas may have.
Your Honor, may the state remain seated.
Yes, you may, Ms. Blake.
And Mr. Douglas, I'll just let you know, the microphones are directional. So if you angle it kind of up under your chin, it will probably pick you up the best. And my intent, Your Honor, is simply to ask a few questions and have him then read his statement.
I think that's appropriate. Thank you, Ms. Blake.
Would you please state your name for the record?
Ron Douglas.
Hey, Alex.
That's Douglas.
Mr. Douglas, which victim in this matter are you related to?
I am Tammy's father.
Have you prepared a statement today?
I have.
Would you please read your statement for the record?
Before moving to Idaho, she lived 1 block away. It was difficult for us when she moved. We'd had daily interactions with her and the children. After they moved, we drove to see them for all of the children's weddings and graduations. Our last visit in Idaho with them was in March of 2020. My wife made me promise to return and visit the kids after she passed away. My wife passed away last June. The tragedy of the case has harmed our family's relationship with the kids. I will remain open to rebuilding a relationship with them. It makes me angry, and it destroys me to know Tammy was treated how she was. I find it comforting to know that Tammy is resting peacefully in Utah, buried alone, and near her beloved mother.
Thank you, Mr. Douglas.
All right, you can go ahead and step down, Mr. Douglas, and I'll have the state call its next victim for an impact statement.
Gosh, that is so sad. My prediction is Chad is going to produce tears.
Your Honor, the next victim to present an impact statement will be Kay Woodcock.
Very well.
Kay Woodcock. My guess is he is going to present tears during this to appear sympathetic to the jury.
Thank you.
Mr. Wood.
Thank you. Ms. Woodcock, we know you've already testified in this case, but can you remind the jury which victim you were related to?
Am related to JJ Vallow. He was my grandson, and Tylee Ryan is my step niece.
And beginning, that's cute.
Thank
Crap.
you.
Crack.
Did you prepare a statement, a victim impact statement today?
Yes,
Will you please read that for the jury?
sure. Today is an incredibly difficult and bittersweet day. I am filled with pride as I remember and speak about what an amazing grandson we had, and grief-stricken at speaking about how devastated I am in his loss. I sit here today, try and explain the immense pain that me and everyone in my family continues to endure daily. But how do I do that? What words carry the strength and impact to really ensure you feel the joy and love that JJ created and the impact of his death? There aren't any. No words can truly describe and fully demonstrate the depth of pain his death has created in our hearts and our lives. The loss of a grandchild is immensely painful under normal circumstances for any grandparent. The death of a grandchild at the hands of another brings pain that is indescribable. If you remember, JJ was born with the name Canaan Todd Trahan. He was born May 25th, 2012. He would have celebrated his 12th birthday just a few short days ago. I will call him Canaan while I talk about his first year of life because that is who he was then. He was born a fighter, 10 weeks premature, weighing in at a tiny but mighty 2 pounds and 14 ounces. From minutes of being born, he was transferred to a hospital with a neonatal intensive care unit where he spent weeks fighting to grow. He was about 2 hours old when I saw him for the first time. Seeing him, I knew he was my grandson. He was the mirror image of my son, Todd, his biological father. Todd has always loved him and always will. Canaan's death has changed his life forever. While he was in the NICU, I was only able to see him for a few minutes at a time until I was notified he would be released to us within days. 25 years since I had a new baby at home and never a preemie with all their special needs. Larry and I didn't hesitate immediately. We said yes. The only place we wanted him to be was home with us. The night before he was discharged, I spent the night in a little room next to the NICU, talking to nurses, learning things that our little preemie grandbaby would need. The next day, it was time to leave. The nurse brought a wheelchair in and said, "Have a seat. We'll get you out of here." I looked at her, perplexed. I said, "I don't need a wheelchair. I can walk." She let me know that it was hospital policy. I sat in the wheelchair, took Kanan in my arms, and was wheeled out of the hospital like a new mama. I felt so much pride for this little baby who had not only overcome being born 10 weeks early, but also being born with illicit substance in his tiny little body. He was ready to come home well before he was expected. Well, before he was expected, and my pride in him knew no bounds. We knew then that he was a champion and so special. That day began an amazing experience of raising our cherished little man. While Kanan had been in the NICU, he spent much time hooked up to machines and monitors that he didn't get to get snuggled all day, every day, like a typical newborn. The noises and routines of the NICU were gone, and it was such a huge change for him. His first night home, I bathed him. He cried so hard, and I cried along with him. My heart was so heavy with the disadvantages he was experiencing through no choice of his own. My husband, Larry, who is Paw, asked me to give Kanan to him. He placed Kanan on his bare chest and wrapped his robe around him, gently breathing on his head until he stopped crying and fell asleep. It became a daily occurrence, part of our routine. He would hold him for hours so Kanan would feel loved, comforted, and secure. I saw my husband in a new light, seeing what type of daddy he was to a newborn. It was like Kanan made us young newlyweds. Larry jumped in, feet first, and did all the things a new father should and more. It made our relationship grow and gave us new strength. Kanan was our strength, and we were his comfort. His first 6 months, we went to countless doctor appointments for his host of medical problems. We went to appointments with doctors for his heart, kidney, urology problems, speech, occupational therapists, and regular pediatricians for the things that every baby does. We were always on the move, going from one doctor to another, constantly working to ensure he thrived and grew. That, along with loving him, was our number one priority. At each appointment, it was pretty much guaranteed I would cry. It hurt so badly to see everything he was experiencing, not only from being born prematurely with drugs in his system. The decision was made to place Kanan with Charles and Lori after they approached us with their desire to have a child of their own. We agonized over the decision, but knew from our past interactions with them that it was the right one. Charles and Lori were granted custody a few short months later. It was then Kanan became JJ. It was happy and devastating at the same time. We loved raising him. We gave all our love and energy, ensuring he grew, thrived, and knew what unconditional love. That time was priceless, and his growth and milestones were evidence of our love for him. But we knew this was the best decision for his future, to have siblings and access to the types of schools and services we didn't have available in Lake Charles. When he left, I felt a grief that can only be compared to the grief of losing someone to death, which is now a feeling we all know too well. We barely made it 30 days before we were standing on Charles' steps, ready to love on our baby. When the door opened, there he was in his little baby walker. I saw tears in his eyes at seeing us, right along with the huge toothless grin. It was clear that he missed us too. Before I could take a step, Larry swooped him up in his arms, and at 11 months old, he wrapped his tiny arms around Larry, laying his head on him. The connection was still so strong. We never lost that special connection with our sweet little man, and we were always his love, comfort, and safety. It is soul crushing that his energy and adventurous Oh, goodness, wait, hang on. I made it a few months before I had to get to my JJ. So in November of 2014, I made my first trip to Hawaii, quickly returning once again in December with Larry. We would visit about every 4 to 5 months because it was such a long trip to Hawaii from Louisiana. One we were happy to make, and we stayed for as long as possible, normally 10 to 14 days. We needed to soak up as much JJ time as we could. I remember one trip in the winter of 2015, JJ stayed home with me while Charles and Lori went to church. I was making a big pot of gumbo. I had to bring a little bit of Louisiana to Charles, and JJ was excited to help me. We pulled up a stool and he poured in ingredient after ingredient. I can still see him standing next to me, intently pouring chicken broth in the pot. Afterwards, he climbed on the counter and just watched, taking it all in. It is a memory that I will always cherish and dearly hold on to. During our visits, Charles or Lori would comment on how JJ would do things with us that were a stark contrast for them. He always awoke at the crack of dawn, never sleeping any later. When visiting, we would have JJ sleep with us. He would sleep until 9 or 10 o'clock, which astonished them. There was never a doubt. He had an innate and unbroken attachment to us. Each visit, no matter where they lived, Lori always expressed her deep appreciation that we gave them the greatest gift ever. That is just one part of why this causes so much pain. It is a betrayal that can't be explained. JJ was incredibly smart. He was reading on a middle school level by the time he was 4. I remember being in a store with him on the aisle with eye drops, and there he
Wow, I
was
didn't
reading
know
off the
that.
labels: Visine, Cysteine, antihistamine, one long word after another. I hadn't seen him do that before, and I was blown away. He was brilliant. He would occasionally stumble on a syllable, but we took the time to go through and help him figure it out. But wow, the amount of awe I was in still makes me smile and feel the same pride I did that day. As he got a little older, he was enrolled in a private academy in Arizona, which focused on every aspect of
matter.
educating and empowering children like JJ. He loved his school and they loved him. It was there where it was discovered another level of brilliance JJ possessed. I remember when Charles told us he's a math savant, he could calculate anything. I continually wonder what he would have become, what type of man would he have become? Not only was JJ smart, but he was also fun, a very contented child, healthy, compassionate, and empathetic. JJ didn't show his empathy and compassion with hugs and kisses. In fact, you had to chase him down for those kisses. Instead, he showed his empathy and compassion with gentle touches and soft tones when he spoke. He would constantly stop to ask people if they were okay, if he could see they were hurt. His world was fascinating and exciting due to his huge imagination. He would put on concerts for his stuffed animals under our enormous tree, playing the drums on buckets, pots, and pans. The joy he exuded and shared can't be measured. I loved watching him, taking him in and seeing how he approached the world. I never got enough of him. Now I've had all I will for the rest of my life and only have memories. When Charles and Lori married, Tylee was 3 years old. She was the most precious, blonde-haired, blue-eyed little girl. Tylee was an absolute mama's girl, which there was never a doubt. I was thrilled to have a new niece, especially one as sweet as her. Larry and I were driving to Austin, Texas to visit them on one of many visits, and we passed a roadside stand selling swings made from old tires. I saw one that was a horse complete with a saddle and stirrups. I grabbed Larry's arm and said, "Stop, we have to get that for Tylee." Her brother Colby and stepbrothers Cole and Zach were always around her. She needed something just for her, and she loved it. Tylee was 9 years old when JJ became her little brother. She loved him so incredibly much, and he loved her right back. She doted on him, and he loved every minute of attention he got from his big sister. That love is displayed in the last photo taken of them together at Yellowstone, both grinning and hugging each other. As a big sister, Tylee would put notes on her bedroom door, one being "Do not enter." As you can assume, even though JJ could read and interpret words and their meanings, it didn't mean he listened. After all, isn't that what little brothers do? He would burst into her room. She would laugh, tease, and tell him to get out. I think she did it on purpose just to joke and play with him. It was hilarious to see them interact and warmed our hearts seeing them together. JJ adored our niece Maddie. On her 8th birthday in October of 2020, we were celebrating and singing happy birthday to her. The glow of the candles shining on her face, the huge grin that kids get during the singing hit me like a truck. I took the keys from Larry and went to the car and just bawled until I could compose myself enough to rejoin the party. It was the moment I knew that JJ didn't get his 8th birthday song, and it broke me. It was just so wrong. He didn't get to have that joy and feeling of love and celebration of his birthday. It is now a grief that we are confronted with yearly, a stark and blaring reminder that we are never going to be able to celebrate that joy with him again. We never know when one of those moments will hit, but I can tell you there have been too many situations in the past few years where we were slammed with the fact that JJ won't hit another milestone. JJ loved school, loved his families, friends, and cousins, especially his cousin Braxy, Brandon Boudreaux's oldest son. Those two had such a special bond and love for each other. There were so many lives he touched that feel the immense pain and loss of him being gone. 4 of our grandchildren, near JJ's age, often tell us how they love and miss him. It is heartbreaking to have a conversation with an 11 or 12-year-old. How do you make them feel okay about it or safe? So yes, this is our life now, trying to comfort our other grandchildren while they try to comfort us. The constant question remains, who would he have become? What kind of man would he have been? Would he be a famous scientist with incredible math skills? Would he be, what would his amazing imagination have bloomed into? Would he have been the next Albert Einstein, Steve Jobs, Tim Burton, Elon Musk? We will never know. But we do know how incredibly special he was to us and now to countless others just by looking around this room. I can't express just how much I wish I could have more time to create memories with him and with Charles. There's a hole in my heart and the hearts of every member of my family that can never be filled and will remain for the rest of my life. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, you did that, Chad. You did that. Face your accusers and your victims.
All right, thank you. The state can call its next victim for an impact statement.
Next, we'll have Matthew Douglas, Your Honor.
Very well.
So that's probably one of Tammy's relatives. Her brother, maybe? Yeah, Running Bear. They probably have already decided, the jury, about the death penalty, whether he'll get it.
Good morning.
Morning.
Can you please state your full name and then spell your last name?
It's Matthew Ronald Douglas, Douglas.
Thank you. And if you wouldn't mind, would you pull your microphone up just a little bit? Thank you
Okay.
very much. Would you tell the jury who you're here to talk about today?
I'm here to talk about my sister Tammy.
Thank you. Did you prepare a statement?
Yes, I did.
Would you please read that statement at this time?
October 19th, 2019. For me, that is when this tragedy starts. But it is by no means its actual beginning. For me, and my own segment of the Douglas clan, I can speak to the pain that started on that date and how it only grew as more and more things in our lives were upended. To those I speak to, I have come into this ordeal far into the timeline of things and have the thankful luxury of hindsight and having information neatly presented or as neat as life can possibly hand you in these circumstances. You're all on the outside looking in. For those of us directly affected, who you'll hear from or may have already, we're finally getting to let our voices in some capacity finally be heard in a meaningful manner, and we lived it. Often, minute to minute, hour to hour, day to day. For my little family, which for a family of 10, who am I kidding? It's not little. And especially for me, it has been a nightmare that you feel never ends. A continual cascading escalation of what's next. Every time I felt I started to grasp an element of control, if such a thing can exist, of my grief over the loss of my oldest sister, something new came along and ripped it open. Hearing from your siblings that your brother-in-law has remarried and kept it from your family weeks after the fact. That's painful. Hearing the day after our family Christmas party, the first without her, that her body had been exhumed. And at the time, not knowing the depth of why. That is gut-wrenching. And then the world goes upside down and topsy-turvy further. Like you're being caught in a cheap holiday snow globe, thrown about and feeling like everything is obscured. Missing kids? Wait, there were kids? Now my brother-in-law and his new bride have fled from Idaho to Hawaii for what? And everybody at this point knows the evidence presented, the details big and small, many I still can't wrap my head and my heart around. The chain of events more clearly than I need rehash. Things happened so fast. We often learned of things from news or social media before we could be contacted formally by law enforcement. I always felt sorry for the moments that happened to whichever detective or member of the prosecutor's office we'd hear from. Because news moves fast these days, and it is often far outside their control to warn us before we learn of it. From heartless media jackals looking for a sensational story. Thankfully, there's still good people that still exist in that profession too. And as unorthodox as it may seem to find a silver lining and small blessings for, it is kind-hearted, truth-seeking journalists who didn't blindside us and the victims' families, or think we were just a quick quote to misuse to their ends. Because finding out things in real time that directly impacted and destroyed your family was never enjoyable. Finding out how much deeper the rabbit hole went in this with no consideration for our pain and the continued impact on us all. I don't wish that on anyone.
This is
And
a
yes, I
commentary
said
on social
destroyed
media.
because losing Tammy, who to me was the emotional heart and glue of our siblings group, was a slow and steady destruction of elements of our family as we knew it. Mom was so heartbroken that it only seemed to accelerate and compound her chronic health issues, especially her 30-plus year battle with leukemia. We lost her last year, just a little over a week away from now. It'll be a year on June 8th. As she seemed to finally be ready to lay down her proverbial sword and shield after a tumultuous spring of emotions tied to it all. I still remember the last normal conversation I had with her just 3 days before Mother's Day, when she went into the hospital for the last time and then was sent home on palliative hospice care until she passed. Mom isn't here today, and by no means am I her voice in anything, nor is anyone. She was uniquely her own. I can speak to the impact I saw secondhand on her of losing Tammy. We often joked in the last few years that I was her emotional support human because we both understood the things about a life of chronic pain and health issues. In some of our tougher conversations, we were open and honest about how much her being gone affected us. Mom missed her dearly every damn day. I miss her, but not the pain and the heartbreak she was in at the end, because she had long ago earned that reprieve. Tammy's kids cut off contact with a lot of the Douglas side of the family for years after everything, and in some cases still do, in choosing to defend their father. I stand by their freedom to associate. Our freedom to associate is important to us as a society, but it is often a measure of a person by who they choose to or not to associate with. Having them
I
not
agree, Rachel.
standing by their mother hurt. If they ever want to rectify that position or reconnect, they know where their uncle lives or how to find out. I'm not hard to find.
It's so sad he has to say this here in court. How hurt they are.
Family ties
Oh, God.
were broken. To put it simply, the loss of Tammy revealed true natures and behaviors of family that perhaps previously were dismissed, hidden, or ignored blatantly. This isn't a place of grievances, but to explain the impact losing your sibling's heart and glue has. When masks come off and people are so true and real to themselves, for better or worse, that some recognize that things aren't healthy and it's time to fix that. It's painful creating boundaries with people in your life. Yet you're really raised to believe you should fight like hell to protect and love dearly. But it's also healing, at least on the outside of the boundary, but things will never be the same. and Tylee and JJ. Two kids I never knew existed prior to all of this, and to whom me and my family are now forever tied in tragedy to. I have
God, that's
kids
sad.
close to their ages. To say, even though I'm not related to them, I'm not impacted would be lying.
That's very poignant.
Larry and Kay and all of your family. For me and mine, our hearts have hurt with you. As I've seen yours hurt with ours over Tammy. We have been grateful to the fact without your tireless love for those children, would we even be here now? And you've been a voice for my sister when often others wouldn't have. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That was very poignant for him to point out how they're all connected now, even though they didn't know each other, and how Tammy's children didn't
Your Honor, the state would
stand
next
up for
call
her.
Annie
How
Cushing.
hurtful that was.
Okay, very well.
Yeah, I hope more people speak on the kids.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Rickson, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ma'am, will you please state and spell your full name for the record?
Annie Cushing, Cushing.
Can you please explain for the record, are you related to one of the victims in this case?
I am. I'm Tylee Ryan's aunt, Joseph Ryan's sister.
And as you came here today, did you come with a statement that you'd like to share with the jury?
I did.
Do you have that with you?
I do.
Would you like to go ahead and read that now, please?
Sure. Thank you. I remember getting a call from my brother Joe in 2002 to tell me he had gotten married, converted to the LDS faith, and was expecting a baby. Joe had been the perennial bachelor of the family, in his 40s, never married, and no kids. So this was very surprising news. He wanted to fly me out to meet his new wife. They were both so excited to be having a little girl. They had already picked out her name and were well ahead of schedule, buying the best of everything this little baby would possibly need. A couple years later, we vacationed together as families. Joe was the quintessential first-time father. Every developmental milestone Tylee achieved convinced him all the more she was clearly a child prodigy. He was also convinced she looked just like him and would find excuses to refer to her as Daddy's soul girl. Truth be told, Tylee actually looked more like her mom's side of the family, which I never told Joe. But on the inside, she was so her dad. She was always dressed like a princess and had an arsenal of hairstyles that she chose from each day. But once she learned to talk, she would let you know what she wanted and was prepared to negotiate those desires like she was finalizing a legally binding contract. Even as a little girl, Tylee knew what she wanted, and we were all her humble servants. Fast forward to 2018. I flew out to Phoenix. Sorry. I flew out to Phoenix after my brother's death and was able to reconnect with Tylee. She was intelligent, clever, funny, sarcastic, and had the voice of an angel. She would just walk around the house singing. She would eventually take her love for singing to the karaoke platform Smule, leaving behind breadcrumbs for those of us who loved her and the thousands who would come to love her.
That's true. I did see her.
I could also tell she was depressed, and I desperately wanted to reach her to let her know I wanted to be in her life as much as she would allow. We just happened to connect on pop culture. We'd referenced ridiculous memes and viral videos, and her mom had no idea what we were talking about. So Tylee and I would take turns explaining the references. It was the first spark of connection, our common ground. Our second was over questions she had about what I did for a living. Oddly enough, her dad and I were both analysts. So I think it felt safer for her to ask about my world than her dad's, since any mention of her dad was a trigger for her mom, and she hadn't seen her dad in a while. I even told her that if nothing else, she definitely had the personality of an analyst. Facts were very important to her. Case in point, her mom, who was braggadocious and never let facts get in the way of a good story, was telling me about one of Tylee's academic achievements, and Tylee corrected her on a relatively inconsequential detail her mom had overstated. I teased her afterwards and was like, dude, who does that? You couldn't have just let that detail slide. And we had a good laugh. But to Tylee, I think if it wasn't accurate, it just wasn't meaningful. She was exacting, just like her dad. My last night in Phoenix, we were supposed to have a girls' night out, but her mom changed her mind and said she was going to bed. It turned out to be the best gift she could have given me because it was the first time on that trip Tylee and I actually had time alone to connect. We enjoyed some small talk and foraged for food, but then I took a calculated risk and decided to share some things that I thought were really special about her. First, let me say, I've watched a lot of true crime over the years and know the tendency of family members to apply a halo effect to their loved ones after they pass, especially if they were victims. But after I left, one of my adult kids reached out to me to see how I was doing. We had an extended text message exchange about my time in Phoenix. And I talked about that interaction, which memorialized it. I just happened to find it in the course of the case. And I was like, no one's going to believe this actually happened. Everyone's going to attribute this to the Dateline effect. So I've actually published it publicly. For context, I had shared details about some of the conflict in the home leading up to this snippet. I wrote, Tylee opened up to me the last night after Lola went to bed. I feel trapped. I connected with Tylee, but don't want anything to do with Lolo ever again. And for this next snippet, I had shared some details about an outburst Tylee had toward her mom after she had said something grossly inappropriate about her dad. I wrote, she was this angry, resentful, sarcastic teen the entire week. Then we talked alone, and she was putty. She was so sweet and genuinely responsive to the genuine positive feedback I gave her. There's a picture of Tylee floating out there where she has the same sweet smile I saw that night. It had a vulnerability to it. It's my favorite picture of her because here she was, this walled garden, and in that interaction, she let me in. Even if it was just a step past the threshold, that brief exchange was the highlight of that week for me. Since learning more about her story, even up to that point, I completely understand why Tylee wasn't quick to let anyone in. Excuse me. By sharp contrast, according to Alex Gilbert, the defendant's neighbor who testified, he said Tylee didn't like people. That's not true. She wasn't ever angry or disrespectful in any way toward me, and I was there less than a week. We got along swimmingly. Now, his reported follow-up statement about her not liking him, that tracks. She was not one to suffer fools. I also found out in that chat she loved New York City.
Shade.
That was my open door. So I lobbed the idea of flying her out for her 18th birthday over the fence, and it was a hit. As I said in that text exchange, I was done with her mom and her extremist beliefs, but I thought there was a chance I'd have the opportunity to develop a relationship with Tylee that wasn't dependent on her mom. I planned to show her the best views that tourists don't know about, walk the High Line together, get real pizza, take her to the rotating restaurant in Times Square with breathtaking 360 views of the city, and let her reconnect with my daughter, who she hadn't seen since she was little. Her 18th birthday couldn't have been further from this celebratory event I had imagined. Excuse me. As her remains had been recently discovered in the defendant's backyard. Getting back to our last time together, I want to be fair. That trip certainly wasn't all bad. There were also some very sweet moments between Tylee and her mom, moments of hilarity and a fun outing. I also didn't see anything concerning with JJ. Everyone was nurturing and protective of him. JJ, like his big sister, didn't let just anyone in. I had no idea if I'd be able to connect with him. I was fascinated by this little boy who had a wild imagination and the closest bond I've ever seen a child have with a dog. Bailey was his constant companion. But with JJ, as more of an outsider, your interactions felt more like moving alongside him rather than engaging directly. So I was looking for, excuse me, any possibility of our worlds to kind of cross. To that end, one thing I noticed was JJ didn't just watch TV. It was like an immersive experience. He'd be talking to the characters, commenting, imitating sounds, especially explosions. He loved imitating explosions. So I tried to do the same thing, but kind of tamped down and on the DL. I would just look at the TV and comment as something outrageous, like, what? That's wild. So we were both just kind of yelling at the TV. Whether it was a connection or not, it at least made watching TV a lot more fun. But then this one time shortly after that, his mom and I were talking in the kitchen next to the island. It's germane to the story. As a function of JJ's autism and unbounding energy, he'd run in this one circuit, which included the area just on the other side of the island. And their house at that time was palatial, so it was a pretty significant circuit. But on one trip, he broke out of his circuit and without slowing down, ran into the kitchen and into me, throwing off my balance a bit because I wasn't expecting it. Without a word, he hugged me and kept on running. I stood there stunned and asked his mom, was that a drive-by hugging? I was so touched because it was the first discernible indicator that we connected. That night, as she was putting him down for bed, I heard him ask her, will Annie be here when I wake up? Again, we never interacted directly in any way, but he recognized presence. So like Tylee, I didn't know if our worlds would ever collide in any meaningful way, but I believe that love is a universal language that's somehow communicated between sincere hearts. Just a month after that visit, Tylee wrote in an Instagram post on her mom's birthday that she had, quote, won the lottery with this one as my mom. So I believe there was hope for them to one day be able to set up some healthier boundaries and find peace. But just 4 months after that post, to the day, that would all change. That was the day her mom met the defendant. It was the spark that eventually would set so many of our lives ablaze. This case has been death by 1,000 cuts. Each detail that would come out over the past 4 years was just another cut. Sorry. It's taken a toll on my family, my health, and my overall perspective. And it felt like the world had become a more dangerous place. Just a little peek behind the curtain. There was one time early in the case, Tylee and JJ were still missing, and the city was in lockdown because of the pandemic, and police were out en masse because of protests and riots in the city. It was like the whole world had gone mad. But I had gone for a run through Times Square, which looked like a ghost town with a sea of mental health billboards. When I passed a corner newsstand, there was a picture of Tylee and JJ on a magazine cover with a heart-grabbing headline. Seeing that against a backdrop of what looked like a post-apocalyptic landscape made it all the more surreal. But to
My
be clear,
God.
it's still surreal. It always will be. If someone had told me in 2002 that in 20 years' time, Joe and Tylee would both be dead, and I'd be swept up in a criminal case around Tylee's murder, I wouldn't have believed it. Tylee had her whole life ahead of her. She had dignity, she had dreams, she had goals. This defendant stole all of that. To close on a high note, a Greek philosopher once said, "The wheels of justice turn slowly, but grind exceedingly fine." I believe that has happened in this case. Thank you.
Thank you.
Damn.
Your Honor, we've had a question raised. We might ask the marshal if there's a box of Kleenexes at the witness stand.
Sure.
And Judge, could we have a sidebar for a minute as well?
Yes.
Oh, gosh, that was so hard to hear. It's so hard to hear when an account of an aunt just being out and about. You know, just out and about. And then having to see her family member on a magazine cover in relation to a heinous death. The girl that she connected with, you know, this little baby. Because, you know, when you have children in your lives, from the time they're babies, you see them like this. You see them like this forever, like little babies. You know, even though they might grow up to look like this, you still remember them as the little innocent baby that they were. And the innocence, you know, and to hear how her life was so fucked up by her mother. Yep. Johnny, I remember when I became an aunt. I became an aunt before I had kids, and they were like my babies too. You know, I felt extremely protective and motherly and protective over them. And you still see them regardless of how old they are. I have a niece on my ex-husband's side who was born on the same birthday as me. She was born on my birthday. I still see her as that little girl, even though now she's a totally grown woman and she's actually a successfully employed, about to get married grown woman. I still see her as that little girl. Lori's brother did not kill Tylee's dad, but he tried to kill Joe Ryan, Tylee's dad. He even did a stand-up comedy routine about it. He went to jail for 90 days for it. He tried to tase Tylee's father in the balls, and it didn't work. Annie Cushing, the person who just spoke, now believes that her brother's death is suspicious. And I understand why, because he died of quote unquote natural causes. He was relatively young. They had tried to kill him before. Lori had mounted a vicious smear campaign against Joe Ryan, saying that he had SA'd Tylee and Colby. I don't know whether that was true or not, but I am more willing to believe. I'm more willing to believe that Lori lied about that now, based on all the stuff we know now. 2 of her husbands have died. Running Bear, 2 of her husbands. Charles Vallow, and she's going to be facing trial in Arizona for that next year, I believe, or later this year. I think it's next year. That's right. Mara Semda. I don't know. She did. Lori had access there. If you want to go look at, so I'm going to share the link for Annie Cushing's YouTube channel. She has been following this case in detail. She has been covering this case since the time all of this happened. And she does take a very analytical approach. She's an incredibly intelligent and successful woman. There's her link. Okay. Well, if Arizona has a death penalty, then we may see Lori getting it. We may see it. But the thing is that would be one death that they are trying her for in Arizona. If they were able to get more evidence about Joe Ryan's death,
something that I can never reconcile.
uh-oh.
That is the impact on them. An impact that will echo
Well, we don't know who this is.
through their lives.
They had the microphone.
My twins, now 4.5 years old, are far too familiar with death at such a young age.
I'll find out who
Our once strong and joyful family bonds have been bruised and broken. I have always been so grateful I married into a big, loud, close-knit family. From day one, I was Aunt Kelsey. Tammy was truly my sister.
Hi, MK.
And I cherish the relationships I built with each of her children, my nieces and nephews. However, the relationships with our nieces and nephews, once filled with love and laughter, are now incredibly strained and painful. My children do not know their cousins. The joy of family gatherings, Sunday dinners at grandma's, running around the neighborhood with their cousins, all the things that made our family vibrant and united are now lost. I cannot overstate the closeness, the bonds, the depth of relationships that have been shattered. My children and Tammy's grandchildren are growing up missing out on the essential family connections that brought so much richness to Tammy's own children's lives. I desperately hope these relationships can be repaired. The toll has been profound. My mother-in-law passed away last year, and the strain from Tammy's death and the severed relationships with her grandchildren took a monumental toll on her health. She passed without fully repairing these relationships, a reality that I cannot accept. Reflecting on these past 4.5 years, every joyful moment is overshadowed. Memories are tarnished, especially those of my children's early years. We've sought counseling, we've leaned on our family for support to navigate through trauma and grief. But we are exhausted beyond measure. Tammy's murder is the direct cause of our suffering. Pain, fractured relationships, and unhealed wounds are all part of the aftermath. This is the legacy of anguish and sorrow that will haunt our family for generations. Thank you.
All right, if the state has another victim to have an impact statement offered, we can do that at this time.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state would call Ben Douglas.
This is another one of Tammy's relatives. Anyone named Douglas is on the Tammy side. They had the microphone off when they announced the last one, so it does sound like she was like the sister-in-law.
You can proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Douglas, can you state your name and spell it for the record?
Benjamin Douglas, Benjamin, Douglas, Douglas.
And can you tell the jury which victim in this case you're related to and how?
I am Tammy Daybell's youngest brother.
Thank you. Did you prepare a statement to read today?
Yes, I have one.
If you could do that now, thank you.
October 10th, 2019, I became a father of twins after years of my wife, Kelsey, and I struggling to have children. We started the current chapter of our life. Just 9 days later, on Saturday, October 19th, 2019, exhausted as a parent to newborn twins is, I received a phone call from my sister Samantha informing that our sister Tammy had passed away overnight. I was in shock and physically unable to move out of that bed for hours after, sobbing and wondering why this had. I had seen her just a few weeks previous when she stopped by our home alongside my parents, bringing gifts for the twins and excitedly saying that she had been hoping they'd show up in time for her visit. My children only know their Aunt Tammy from pictures, stories, and grave marker that they frequently request to visit. They only know their dad as someone dealing with great amounts of grief and anxiety, and I only know how to parent as someone fighting through the tidal waves of loss, media coverage, texts, phone calls, and at-home visits from reporters. The amount of sleepless nights I've had from raising twins pales in comparison to the nights I've been kept awake by nightmares of someone close to me hurting my children. The amount of damage having trust that was built over decades of family time completely broken does to an individual is unmeasurable. The pain of not just losing your sibling, but to have their children, my nieces and nephews, completely alter their relationships with me is excruciating and a lasting hurt. Instead of there being a collective healing and grieving process, there is still ongoing damage and pain. Where there should be love and comfort from close family bonds, there are now major fractures that I can only hope will one day mend and be made whole. I miss sharing our birthday month, which now feels hollow and empty. I miss my sister. Thank you.
All right, if the state would like to call another victim to make an impact statement, you may do so.
Connor, could we approach?
Yes.
Well, I hope they turn on the microphone before they say the next victim's name. So we're not all trying to run around. So there's Chad all alone at his table without his whoopee.
All right, thank you, counsel. We've been going some time at this point. In lieu of lunch, however, we do just want to take a restroom break because I'm not sure that there's too many more. However, I think it is a good time to stop and give everyone a break for a moment. So we'll take about a 15-minute recess and come back on for additional victim impact statements.
All right, please.
Wow. So you all tell me what hit you, what was said that hit you the most, which victim impact statement hit you the most? For me, what is really important and poignant to me is how they are bringing in the experience of being out there in the world and being hit with all of this, without warning, like absolutely just stunned. Kay's statement, I think that's the one that really sent tears down my cheeks. Just hearing about JJ, but also hearing Annie talk about Tylee. Tylee, if she would have been given a chance, both of the kids, but I guess I identify with Tylee because I'm a girl. I kind of see her at my age, or that I remember myself at that age. I think a lot of us can see ourselves in that young girl, right? We can see ourselves in that young girl. And know that, she was at a time in her life of rebellion. That's just a typical age of rebellion. And for her not to be, I did too, Queen Bella. For her to get wrapped up in this absolute madness absolute madness just because she is Lori's daughter is just so, it's just so hard to fathom, so hard to process. And, you know, and I always go back to as well, see how we're feeling. We are the people on the outer rim of impact, right? Of all of this. We are the people who are, you know, stand to be the least impacted by something like this. But even just not even knowing these people, but following the case and hearing their stories is devastating. And it makes you think, and it makes you wonder about life, right? So imagine being closer, being so much closer to it. And that's who we're hearing from. And you know, they are put on restrictions in these victim impact statements. They can't talk about, there are things they can't talk about. So I'm sure there's a lot more that they would love to talk about outside of those in the court. Other things they would like to bring in, but they really need to keep it to a certain, you know, time frame and a certain subject matter. But just hearing what they are able to say, and hearing how Tylee was so smart, and JJ, I didn't know, I might have heard it before, but JJ, he was reading at such a high level at a young age, which happens with kids on the spectrum. You know, their brains will process super fast, even if their social capacity isn't like other kids, right? And oh, it's to see them just get literally wiped off of the planet so that Chad and Lori could be unburdened with money and have the rest of their lives together. And I keep coming back to, how the fuck did these people think that they were going to be able to get away with this? These idiots, these incredible idiots. And then how did anybody think that they would be able to defend themselves at trial, spend all this time and money, sell your house to your lawyer to put on a defense, and then when, you know, when you're declared guilty, when the verdict says guilty, 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 they come back faster with a verdict than they did with Lori. He's like, no, okay, I'm not going to put on any witnesses for my death penalty. I'm just going to sit here and look and just take the beating like a martyr. But you know, I see a man who's really truthfully only thinking about himself. Only thinking about himself. And not even allowing the pain that he has caused, that he and his current wife have caused, to enter into his bubble, into his little protective portal. You know, it isn't going into his veil or whatever. You know, so this is one of the many reasons I love court, is because this is where you know, in court, we're not going to play with your religious delusions. We're not going to play with you saying, well, you know, I'm telling you, Lori and I were married in a previous life, so we were meant to be together. We're supposed to be together. I'm telling you, that's the way it's supposed to be. And, you know, we had this warrior We had this warrior in our lives who was there to protect his sister and all of that. It's so freaking insulting. So then when you hear the actual impact that all of that craziness has had on the people who are closest, and we're sitting here with our tissues and saying that we're ugly crying. These people have been ugly crying and processing grief for years now, still trying to process it all. That's right, Rachel. He was arrested before he could get that entire body makeover done. Right. Ooh, that's a lot of crocheting, Crystal. Good job. So for me, what's so impactful is hearing how the high profile nature of all of this, like it's not just the act in and of itself of their family member being murdered by this insane, cult leader and his wicked wife. So that in and of itself is life-changing and traumatic and something you're going to have to process for years. Then it becomes an incredibly high profile case where you don't know from one moment to the next if someone is talking to you because they want to put your information online on their, to get clicks and views. They don't know if someone is contacting them because they really care or because they're going to get some, they're going to get some remuneration out of talking to them and then putting that information on a web, on a YouTube video. Right. So now they're not only processing their grief, but they are being contacted by the media, by, probably all kinds of YouTube vultures. Right. And, media has always been a factor. News media has always been a factor in, in our lives from a high, when there's some sort of high profile crime going on. But now it's different. It's the social media aspect of this means that when they are contacted by somebody and they say that they're media, I could contact them and say, with my YouTube channel, I'm media, and they have no way of knowing whether I'm going to be respectful to their information or just completely exploit it and exploit them. They have no way of knowing. And they're just thrown into this world and this whole way of thinking about, who should I talk to? Should I talk to anybody? Why? And it's really that story that Annie told about being on a run and then just coming across a magazine cover with her own niece on it. Sorry, I've got a helicopter flying by. That was really impactful to me. And during the so when you see pictures pop up on the screen while they're talking about the victims, that's me doing it, and I've been just trying to pull new pictures. There's only so many pictures I can keep here in my backstage, and so I have to keep taking pictures away and adding pictures. But y'all are talking about Tammy. I think Tammy was absolutely beautiful. I really do. I think she's a naturally beautiful, glowing woman. Look at her next to that fucking slug. I mean, he's a slug, right? She was out of his league. She's beautiful. I mean, what is she the most fashionable person in the world? No, who gives a shit? She's beautiful and she's a good person. She didn't deserve any of this. You don't really see any hint of anything dark or evil in that woman's eyes. I'm sure she wasn't a perfect person. I'm sure that there were things about her that were irritating, just like every human being in the world has things that are irritating about them. But how he could ditch this woman for like a shell of a human being called Lori Vallow. It's just disgusting. So I really do appreciate that her siblings and her family are voicing how hurtful it was to see her children not stand up for their mother. Their mother raised them. Their mother not only raised them, but ran the publishing business, was a teacher. She was just trying to live the life of a good Mormon woman, the way she was raised. I'm sorry, Running Bear. I'm just so I've always been so livid about all of these, every single one of these victims. They're all beautiful. They're all beautiful in their own way, right? I love this picture of JJ. I think it's at a wedding or something. That arm that's holding him there, that's Charles's arm. Another person, another victim in all this that isn't, that hasn't come up yet because the trial for his murder hasn't happened yet is Charles Vallow. Just another guy in love with his wife, this woman who is just trying to live a normal Mormon existence. Yeah, Bema Missy White, they didn't ever really say she was the breadwinner, but she basically was. She basically was. Right. She was the backbone. I mean, and it was sort of, I'm kind of glad that her family and a lot of the family members didn't come out and engage with YouTubers, because we see what happens when people engage with YouTubers in these cases. It can be, the YouTube true crime environment is incredibly toxic. They will take your information and Alex Jones it and make you into a horrible person with a conspiracy. So I was kind of glad that Tammy's family wasn't out there that much, but at the same time, it was, I always wondered how are they doing? You know what I mean? I always wondered, how are they doing? How is Tammy's family? Because we did see more from Lori's family. We've seen, Lori and I'm sorry, we've seen Kay and Larry Woodcock speaking to the media. We heard their perspectives. Annie Cushing, that's Tylee's aunt. She's always been very vocal. I shared her channel in the chat. But it was Tammy's family, and I think maybe Tammy's family felt kind of trapped and stuck because Tammy's kids, if JLR showed up, you'd go to jail. Exactly, evil queen. Exactly. So I wish I could put a billboard on every street corner that says, if anything happens to you or your family, do not engage with a YouTuber. Do not trust a YouTuber. Don't. Even me. I'm a YouTuber. Don't trust. That's why I don't reach out to families. I wouldn't expect them to trust me. Right. You could see it with the Sebastian Rogers type stuff has been going on from case to case to case. They just pick different cases to do it with over time. So when I came around, it was the Watts case. Then it was the Summer Wells case. Then it was Kylie Rodney. There was a little bit of there wasn't a lot of there was a lot of attention around Gabby Petito, not as much disinformation, but a lot of attention around it. But then there was Quentin Simon with, people protesting in front of his mother's house before charges were put on his mother, yelling in front of the house, quote unquote, protesting by putting spotlights on the house and playing baby crying noises and all that stuff. So that there was that with Quentin Simon. Then there was, I'm forgetting another case at the moment. Yes, Truth Matters. I was on Armchair Detective when I first started. When I very first started YouTube, Armchair Detective invited me to come on to talk about the video I did about Rocket Man and her nonprofit. But I have also covered Armchair Detective and how he, how his channel has been terminated, and the reasons why. And, really, I think the issues surrounding what he did with the Watts case. It's heartbreaking. And you see that, we all, when these big cases come out, like Sebastian Rogers is the one right now where you see two sides of things, right? You see all these people covering Sebastian Rogers and bringing out the fights between the parents. And then you see the people who are covering all of that and saying, this isn't right. We need to, so we see all of that. And people get really up in arms and people start saying, this shouldn't be happening. This shouldn't be happening. And then some YouTuber crosses a line and someone goes to sue. We don't see justice about any of this stuff happening. That's right. Michael Vaughn was another one. Thank you, Claus. That was another one. In the Michael Vaughn case, they had basically, oh no, I'm thinking of a different one. No, is Michael Vaughn the one with his mother is Brandy? She comes on YouTube now to speak out as a mother of a missing child and saying, you know, because I think they had YouTube had raked her over the coals, raked her family over the coals. There was another, I'm forgetting the name of this child, but there was another case where a child was literally abducted in his driveway by a FedEx driver. But until that came out, everybody on YouTube for sure knew for sure that it was a stepmom who did it. They had her literally locked up and facing the death penalty. They were raking this woman over the coals. And then all of a sudden, oh, there's actually footage of a FedEx driver, Athena Strand. Thank you. Yes. FedEx driver. Literally, yes, she was found dead. And yeah, Brandy's the mom of Michael Vaughn, right? But the mom of the stepmom of Athena Strand, everybody had her on the guillotine. If it were up to YouTube, Athena Strand's mother would be dead right now because they knew for sure that she had something to do with that little girl being missing. Oh, no, 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 no. It was a fucking FedEx driver who abducted her. Is that the name of the driver? So this is the stuff, and I'm going to say this again, and this is the type of stuff that got me shadow banned, but it's YouTube's fault as much as anybody's that this is going on, you guys, because think about it. Think about it. Would these people be doing this if there wasn't some financial gain? And the way you get financial, by the way, please remember to hit the thumbs up. Thank you very much. How do you get financial gain on YouTube? By getting people all emotional, by spreading disinformation, by stretching out the information on a case far beyond it's supposed to go. Would these people be doing it without knowing that they're going to get some payoff off of it? No. And the only thing standing between a person who's just, you know, a YouTuber who's just going to give you the facts, and a YouTuber who's going to say they're giving you the facts and just spreading all kinds of misinformation to keep the story going and keep the clicks and views going. The only thing standing between those two things is their own moral compass. You can't gauge someone's moral compass from behind their YouTube screen. And, you know, especially in these live chat atmospheres, people get really sucked into, you know, believing that the channel they visit, the person that is running that channel, they're a good person. They have all the best interests at heart. But then when you start seeing that person is pushing the envelope and lying, spreading more misinformation, it's harder to get their most loyal fans to question them. And they go along with it and they spread the misinformation. Evil Queen says, I always remember you saying that. Views and clicks, forget term. Yeah. They don't. Another thing I've noticed is that a lot of people who come into true crime on YouTube have lengthy criminal histories. Now, there's nothing if you're in my chat and you have a lengthy criminal history, I'm not judging you whatsoever. They're 10 minutes late, Crystal. Okay. I'll just keep yapping. There's nothing, I'm not judging people with the, with the criminal history. I don't think that people with a criminal history should not be able to have a YouTube channel, but I think we should have a better way of differentiating when a person with a long criminal history has actually really changed. And it's too hard to do that watching them on social media, right? So I see that there are people who were already like career criminals and they decide to become YouTubers and they choose true crime because it's the thing they know the most. It's the thing they know the most. So, okay, I'm going to start, oh, I can't get a job. I can't find work. What do I know? Maybe I'll start a YouTube channel. What is most interest to me and what do I know? Oh, I know crime. So I'm going to do true crime content. Who turned comments off? What? There's a whole other, it sounds like there's a whole other conversation going on. Anyway, and people with criminal histories, they can change. They do their time and they can change and they can become a new, different person, right? And I'm all for that. But when you start to see that they haven't changed, they're still doing the same things. They still have that criminal mindset. It's a and the thing is, Running Bear, it's that it's not an employment. It's not employment by YouTube. It's a contract. It's a very simple 1099 contractual relationship. So they don't have liability. They don't. It's okay. It's okay, Stacy. They don't have liability. YouTube for any of these people. There should be a higher bar to jump over to become a YouTuber. If you're going to make money making content, especially in true crime, there should be more of a screening of those people, because the bar right now is really, really low. All you have to do is fill out a form and have a social security number, and the criteria for YouTube for you to get monetized, does it have anything to do with your character or whether you're actually making good content? No, it's have you gotten enough hours of watch time and do you have enough subscribers? So it's all about the numbers. It's all about the numbers. And that's true. That's what I'm finding, Running Bear, is that most tragedy pimps most of them have a criminal history. And when they first come, you don't know for sure whether they have moved beyond that criminal mindset or not. If they haven't moved beyond that criminal mindset, they're not going to be truthful. They're not going to be honest. They're going to see their audience, and they're going to see content as just a tool. And they do not see these victims as real people with real feelings, and they don't see that how they are reporting about these victims is impacting them at the time of their lives when they are going through the most trauma. So it's like it's almost standing there while a woman is getting sexually assaulted and yelling at her at the same time. You're a slut. You're a whore. You deserve this. That's what it's like. That's what it's like. These people who go live and talk nonstop about the gossip surrounding a true crime victim's family, and when they're speaking ill of the family, not knowing, based on complete conjecture, blaming things on the family, and yes, and filming it. These people are just tools to them. Tools. But they know that the way to get in with their good graces is to act like they're trying to help them. I'm going to help you. Rocket Man is a prime example of all of this. Rocket Man did not have a criminal history before she came to YouTube, but she had a very lengthy civil litigation history. She already owed thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in civil litigation judgments. And then she comes to YouTube and literally when we first notice her on YouTube, she has put a fucking corpse filter on her face and made up a character named Shazam for Shanann Watts and is mocking her. And then starts a nonprofit with Chris Watts's parents, forges their digital signatures. And, you've heard me talk on and on about that woman. You know how it goes. On down the line, she is now a convicted criminal on a misdemeanor. That's right. Lifetime protection order against her. Now she has 2 protection orders against her. One from Vanessa from Unmasked and another one from Father Snuggles, who is the hey, Janessa. Father Snuggles was the prosecution witness. And there is a protection order against Lana on him too, on his behalf too. I mean, when you're it seems like yesterday, but when Lana and Vanessa were facing each other in court, do you know what one of Lana's questions was? Do you know what one of Lana's questions was? Did you see me in People magazine, Ms. Vanessa? That was one of the questions she asked on the stand when Vanessa was on the stand. Did you see me in OK magazine and People magazine? Hello, Molly Lollipops. We're just waiting for them to come back from their bathroom break. I'm going to look on YouTube and see. I'm sorry. I'm going to look on Twitter and see if they have updated on timing at all. The reporter from East Idaho News, Caitlin Hart, says a bailiff just reminded the gallery to enjoy their chubby num-nums, otherwise known as snacks. Hey, you all with the snacks. They're talking about snacks in court too. While the judge is off the bench. Could this be the courtroom daddy Nate is always talking about? So, yeah, she should, Chopper. She should. Because her behavior is as erratic online. When you see people, like in the TikTok murder case, right? If you go and look at his TikToks, you can see that he's kind of not all there. Absolutely not running bare. In fact, her channel is thriving. That's my whole point here. Lana has almost 50,000 subscribers right now. Okay? So, Lana, the one who has published women's vaginas on her channel, who literally tragedy pimps every single day. Every day. She is blaming other people for murders. She's creating conspiracy theories. She is foul. She is harassing. She's an actual stalker, right? All of those things. And I'm the shadow banned one because I'm talking because I'm pointing out that YouTube promotes that. YouTube elevates that. YouTube loves it. So let's promote the lady who is a known stalker. She now has a criminal conviction. She's an absolute terror, right? Using her own channel, using the channel that she's making money on. And so I am the one who is saying, hey, YouTube, you created that environment. You created that ability for her to do that. So I get silenced. My voice gets muted. Do you see?
Thank you.
what I mean?
Ladies and gentlemen, the jurors are lined up, so we'll go ahead and remain standing. Please, if we can have the jurors return to the courtroom.
Absolutely vultures. Absolute fucking vultures. And then she sat there in court. Yes, they treat it like reality TV. And the problem is that is the dynamic that YouTube has set up. YouTube has made it that way. But do I have it in here? I might have it in here. I am the Idaho 4. What the hell, man?
All right.
I know I put it as a short on my channel.
Hearing's all present accounted for, Your Honor.
Thank you. Please be seated.
Yet she's been playing bingo on the Karen Reed trial. Bingo. She made bingo cards for the Karen Reed trial.
Okay, we're back on the record on KCR 22211623, State of Idaho versus Chad Guy Daybell. I appreciate everyone's patience as we work through this process today. There's a lot of administrative matters being taken up while we're not on the bench, but we're moving things along at this time. I'll note the jurors have returned and are properly seated, and we are continuing with victim impact statements, and I believe the state has a few more victim impact statements this afternoon. So who's going to be calling the next victim up to the stand?
I will, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Beatty, you can call the next person to give a statement.
Your Honor, the next individual would be Colby Ryan.
Okay.
Oh boy. Colby brings me to tears. For those of you who don't know, Colby is Lori's son, Tylee's older brother. Lori's son from her second marriage.
Colby, could you state your full name and spell your last name?
Colby Ryan, Ryan.
Are you here to talk about Tylee and JJ today?
Yes.
How are you related to Tylee and JJ?
Tylee is my little sister and JJ is my little brother.
Did you prepare a statement to read today?
Yes.
Would you like to read that now?
Yes.
Go ahead.
He's probably trying to gather himself.
It is very hard for me. Very hard for me to put into words what it means to have lost my entire family. I lost the ability to watch Tylee and JJ grow up. I lost my relationship with my little brother, which took years to build. Ugh.
It's okay if you need a moment. Take a moment if you need to. It's all right.
It took years to build to even have him be able to look us in the eyes. I lost the ability. Sorry. Sit with my little sister and talk and share our lives. So in short, I lost everything I've ever known. I lost the ability to share my children with them. Or have my children have the privilege to know them and be loved by them. My 3 kids will never know the kindness of Tylee's heart. Or JJ's silly and goofy personality. But more importantly, Tylee and JJ lost their lives. Tylee will never be able to travel like she always wanted to, or have a family of her own. Or find herself in this world. JJ will never be able to spread his love or his light around the world the way he used to. The only way I could describe the impact of their lives being lost is like a nuclear bomb dropping. I will never be able to share her gifts with the world or have all the people who love her get to hear her incredible laugh. Sorry. Ugh. JJ will never get to grow up. And share his one-of-a-kind personality with the world. And everyone who's lost him feels the void. It's not an overstatement to say that I lost everything. But more importantly, we all lost Tylee and JJ. I stand here today, motherless, fatherless, sisterless, and brotherless.
Wow.
The only course forward is to trust in Christ, knowing that He has them in His arms, and wait for the day that we all meet again. I pray for all of you who have bleeding hearts. Thank you.
You.
Man, that was hard to hear. Well, the soulless Chad just
Your
looked
Honor, the
down.
state would next call Samantha William.
Very well.
Him saying that it was like a nuclear bomb hit. That resonated.
Go ahead, Mr. Wixom.
Thank you. Ma'am, will you please state and spell your name for the record?
Samantha Gwilliam, Gwilliam.
And could you remind the jury how you're related to the victims?
Tammy is my sister.
And do you have a prepared statement?
I do.
Would you like to go ahead and read
Yeah,
that now?
I would like to. I speak out for my sister, Tammy Daybell, because she cannot speak for herself. She is dead. And others who were supposed to stand up for her, protect her, and love her did not. From the moment I found out that she was gone, I've never felt peace. In the first few weeks, I had a gut feeling that something wasn't right and that someone had done something to her, but I didn't know why. So many questions come up as a quick funeral is arranged, no autopsy and no answers. As we find out about a quick marriage, I smell a rat. As any woman does, I search out answers and dig through whatever evidence I could find. None of it was reassuring or good. There's still no peace to be found. We are questioned by police about missing children. And this uneasiness I had felt about Tammy's death only intensifies. We are notified that Tammy has been exhumed. And this is my first moment of maybe now I can get the answers I seek. But with the pandemic and exhaustive testing, I don't see results for a long time. My family sits in a limbo of not knowing why or what happened. In the meantime, there's a large investigation, many more questions. We are hounded by news reporters through phone calls, texts, emails, social media, and even with surprise visits at our front door.
Yep.
Still no peace. I am asked about a pet cemetery. And a few days later, I watch with the world as the bodies of two precious missing children are found on the same property where my sister died. I retched and sobbed over learning about JJ and Tylee.
horrifying.
2 more victims and no peace to be found for anyone. When we finally get the long-awaited autopsy results, our worst fears are confirmed and we know that she was murdered. We have spent almost 5 years waiting for there to be peace. My sister, Tammy, was my best friend. Before she moved to Idaho, we talked to each other almost every day, or saw each other almost every day. Her first year there was a hard adjustment, but she made a place for herself there and was a great member of her community. Tammy was a force for good at her school, influencing children, making friendship with others, and being a person you could count on. Pardon me. She loved being a mom, and especially a grandma. She was so excited to be part of their lives. She was content and happy. Her and I had made plans that when we were old that we would live next door to each other. We helped raise each other's children. We were excited for the future. My last visit I had with Tammy is the last time I have felt any peace. I would not be a good sister if I did not defend Tammy as well. She was made out by some in this court as if she was lazy and fat and dying from an illness.
You go, girl.
Look at me right now. I am the same age as Tammy was when she died. She was in better health than I am right now.
Yeah.
Do I look like I am dying? It is not a crime to be a middle-aged woman trying to be healthy and still play a video game or eat fast food occasionally.
Boom.
My sister was ripped from our lives. Because of her murder, we lost a beloved mother, grandmother, sister, aunt, and daughter. She is irreplaceable. She started with 1 grandchild and missed seeing the next 5 that would be born. They will never get to know her. But when Tammy died, that is not the only thing that we lost. Her absence created a void that is unmistakable. We used to have a close relationship with Tammy's children, but now our relationship is strained, and some of the kids that I helped raise no longer speak to us. My mother passed away last June. She had to spend the last of her years separated from these same grandchildren for no fault of her own. My mother declined in health while still not having peace. Her passing was marred by the fact that Tammy's children chose to not participate in her funeral. The lies,
Wow.
deception, and murder have ripped our family apart. We do not feel peace. I am not a dark person or a zombie, and for me and my family to be portrayed this way is unacceptable. I am tired of being vilified, so there is a reason to not listen to me. I stand for truth, and I don't lie. So know as I say this now, my sister should not be dead right now. She should be here alive and smiling with her family and friends. She should be doting on her grandchildren and taking care of her animals. It is a cruel world that has taken her from us. We need to feel some peace for the first time in 5 years. I miss my sister every day. I will grieve for her for the rest of my life. I speak up for her now because she needs a voice. Thank you.
Thank
you,
you
ma'am.
for that. That was a very powerful statement. And Chad just sitting there looking like a
Well, does the state have another victim to make an impact statement?
looking like
Yes, Your Honor.
fucking
The
boob.
state will call Michael Douglas.
Okay.
Another one of Tammy's relatives.
You can inquire, Ms. Blake.
Thank you. Would you please state your name for the record?
Michael Douglas.
And are you related to a victim in this matter?
I am.
And who is that?
Tammy.
How are you related to Tammy?
I am Tammy's sibling.
Did you prepare a statement for today?
I did.
Would you please read that?
I will. I am Tammy's older brother and the oldest of the Douglas siblings. My experience and the impact this has had on me has been profound. The day Tammy was killed, I received a phone call and I looked down to see Samantha's name and I answered the phone. Good morning. Samantha said, it's not going to be. It turns out she was right. I was in shock, and after the funeral, I drove to Idaho the next morning to be at her Idaho memorial. When I left, I called my wife and told her something was off. I tried to keep everyone from jumping to conclusions, mostly myself. I probably should have done more jumping. When we heard about the marriage, we were given a false date to lead us to believe that it had not been only 2 weeks. Then we found out the real date. I'd received a call from my Aunt Vicky and my cousin Julie, encouraging me to pursue an autopsy. I told them I couldn't because I was doing everything I could to keep my mom and dad alive. When we found out about the exhumation, I hoped that there was nothing to be found. And never wanted someone to be more wrong than I wanted Aunt Vicky to be wrong. But it was me that was wrong again. All of us were devastated by the exhumation, but especially my mother.
Oh my gosh.
She saw the exhumation as a desecration of Tammy's gravesite. Once Tammy was reinterred, my mom asked that we would meet again at the gravesite, and we did so, and held a family service. I then received a phone call from my mother indicating that there were 2 missing children. I remember where I was, what I was doing, and the exact feeling of, oh, please no. Please don't let this be so. My heart sank, and I said to my mom, Mom, Chad told us they were empty nesters.
Oh my God.
Surely this is a mistake, not anything to worry about. Maybe they have them in hiding. Maybe there's something else going on. Oh, I was wrong again. People would come up and ask if the kids had been found yet when they would see me in public. The stress and anxiety grew. And then the day came that the children were found. I broke into more pieces than I can count. I was at work, began crying hysterically, and had to be rushed into an office.
Oh man.
I was surrounded by people that had figured out that this was coming long before I did. Hope was lost. I went into therapy, both talk and medicinal. My blood pressure went so high that my doctor prescribed something he'd only done 3 times previous in his long career.
He was afraid I was having a stroke right there in the office and had an ambulance on standby in case I did so.
Wow.
When I learned of the results of the autopsy, I did not sleep for 6 weeks.
Wow.
The nightmare fodder that I have been provided will last me a lifetime. My insurance rates have skyrocketed due to the medications I started on right after the children were found, and I'm now ineligible for certain coverages. As the big brother, I felt and I feel like a failure. I failed to protect Tammy. I looked for a silver lining, as we do as big brothers, trying to set up some kind of a win. And none to be found. For the first time in my life, I was unable to function at the level I always had. Work, family, God, all of my relationships suffered. I had to be told by my therapist that I had already lost, that I would not find a win. I have mostly come to terms with that, but the loss is still so very raw. I now have an angry part that has become hopefully not a permanent part of me. People that have known me most of my life don't know who I am. They don't know what I'm going through because they are not the big brother whose sister was killed. I cannot tell you what my dad or siblings have suffered because I did not lose a child or an older sibling. The grief and suffering is unique to each of us, but has driven wedges of misunderstanding. If this were radioactivity we were dealing with, I would look to the half-life to see when the pain and suffering might stop. The half-life of this experience will cover generations and many lifetimes.
Facts.
The scarring continues and the painful things keep happening. I have likened it to being in a slow-motion train crash these past 4.5 years. Watching loved ones and myself, as well as total strangers, caught up in the disaster, continuing to be pummeled with no end in sight. Today, hopefully, that train wreck loses momentum and finally comes to a screeching halt. I helped to found a charity to honor Tammy's legacy and to keep her memory alive. We named it after her, and I have had many suggest that the name Daybell should not be there. That was her name. That was and is her children's names and her grandchildren's names and will continue to be. We have strived to stay out of the public eye, to not do media requests, to not speak publicly about this, because we have attempted to continue our relationships with Tammy's children,
Yeah,
to be able to have relationships with her grandchildren,
that's what we were talking about.
all of their families. We love them and care for them, but there has been an alienation that is as painful as losing Tammy. We have relatives, children that have joined the family that we have not been allowed to meet due to this train wreck that you're all part of. I have been robbed of the opportunity of growing old with my little sister, being grandparents together and teasing each other into old age. I have had my peace stolen, and I have to fight every day to be patient and kind with others and myself.
Oh, this poor man.
I have had some that have seen my wounds and have attempted to exploit this time of anguish for their personal gain.
That would be
This train wreck has
YouTube.
brought out much good in many, but has fostered much evil in others. I have lost a large portion of my income, my creative energy,
and my ability to be of service to others due to the general loss of energy and health that this has caused. I am wounded,
These are very real
broken,
impacts.
sad, angry, disgusted, betrayed, and looking for answers on the constant pain of grief and loss. We hope that after this is over, we can attain closure and healing and take the next steps to finding ways to heal and grow stronger from these wounds afflicted upon us. Tammy, JJ, and Tylee have all been robbed of that choice and that chance.
That gave a very, very clear, detailed picture of the impact on one
All right, does the
individual's life.
state have any further victim impact statements to provide?
We do not, Your Honor.
Okay.
All right, at that point then, with the proceedings, the next inquiry the court would make is in relation to the defendant's right of allocution. Mr. Pryor, have you discussed with Mr. Daybell his right to make an allocution before the jury considers?
Yes, Your Honor.
And is Mr. Daybell going to make any allocution?
No, Your Honor.
Is that correct, Mr. Daybell? No allocution? Very well. That will conclude the
Correct.
submission of evidence
I'm
and
a
the right of
confident
allocution in
martyr.
this proceeding. The next issue the court will take up then is briefly reviewing the final instructions that will be given to the jurors, as well as a verdict form before they retire for deliberation. We do need to take a moment to review those with counsel outside of the presence of the jurors. They are prepared, so I don't think this will be an extensive break, but we will take a break here for the court to go through jury instructions with counsel. Once that's concluded, we'll have the jurors brought back in for any closing arguments that may be presented by the state and the defense. So if all would rise for the jurors, we'll do that at this time.
Is it just me, or did Judge Boyce sound a little bit sniffly stuff, like his nose had some crying in it? I don't know of another way to put it. There was a lot said about the kids, actually, Johnny. It's just that Tammy has a lot of siblings, so it seemed kind of overwhelming. But Colby Ryan got up and talked about JJ and Tylee, and Annie Cushing got up and talked about JJ and Tylee, mostly Tylee, because she was his. She's Tylee's aunt. So, let's see if they're talking.
That have not been read to the jurors would include instruction as labeled number 5, instruction number 9, number 10, 11, 12, 16, and we've got 14 and 15 is the order I'll be reading those in, and a proposed verdict form. So before I give these instructions to the jurors, I do want to have counsel an opportunity to indicate whether or not on the record there are any objections to the form of instructions. The court would note the Supreme Court just recently approved new criminal jury instructions for this sentencing phase, and the court has incorporated those wherever it was practical to do so, and they were not in conflict with any previous given construction or instructions. So from the state then, I'm not sure who would address the court here. Is it Ms. Blake?
Yes, Your Honor.
Have you reviewed the court's proposed instructions?
Yes, we have, Your Honor.
Have you also reviewed the verdict form?
Yes, we have.
Do you have any objection to the form in which these are going to be submitted to the jurors?
We have no objection, Your Honor.
All right. Mr. Pryor, have you been able to review the proposed instructions in the verdict form?
Yes, Your Honor.
As to the instructions, is there any objection to which these have been drafted by the court?
Judge, this has been objected, and I'm just going to make this a verbal objection, and that's going to be that the court applied the standard of reasonable doubt that you chose to apply based on a previous instruction to the jury before the Supreme Court came out with these decisions. However, the Supreme Court has noted that the instructions are to be applied immediately, and making this a verbal objection to preserve the record that the firmly convinced language of reasonable doubt is what I anticipated and expected to be included in not only the original instructions to the jury, but now the sentencing instructions, and I'll just make that a verbal objection.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Pryor. Are there any other objections on the form of instructions or on the verdict form?
Nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay, well, Mr. Pryor, on that objection, I've considered that previously in the trial for the reason that we had already given the jurors a instruction defining reasonable doubt, and I didn't want to change midstream that definition, whether in this proceeding or in the course of the trial. I've stuck with the instruction that's been used in Idaho for a long time. I have considered your objection. I am going to overrule that objection. And so the instructions that the court's proposed now are going to be provided. We'll give the jurors courtesy copies. There will be one original copy for them to take with them, as well as an original verdict form. We're going to get those jury instructions distributed at this time just on the juror seats. They'll be able to read along, and then I'll read through final instructions. And then if the parties have closings, you can take those up next.
Yeah, and I should also note that even Tammy's siblings, each one of them at a certain point mentioned JJ and Tylee, and how devastating it was for them to hear that not only was their sister murdered, but there were 2 children buried in her backyard where she was killed, and how absolutely horrifying that was to them. And so they are
All right, if
all
those have been distributed, then we can have the jurors brought back in, please.
they're
Thank
all
you.
impacted by all of those murders in one way, shape, or form. Yep, and her family didn't even know the kids. That there is one of Tammy's aunt had a daughter that actually knew Tylee. But other than that, they didn't know each other's families before all of this. So it was kind of healing in a way, really, to hear Tammy's siblings talk about the kids. And then also just to hear their absolute heartbreak about the ongoing impact of not being able to have a relationship with Tammy's kids, their nieces and nephews, and not even being able to speak publicly for fear of alienating these people who are defending their father, not their mother. They're, the murder victim. So since the children of the murder victim are taking the side of the alleged murderer, but now convicted murderer, her family chose not to speak to the public for in the hope that maybe someday they would change, maybe someday they would see the light, they would want to have, maybe someday want to still have a relationship. And I think even in these impact statements, by talking about the kids, they didn't trash the kids. They spoke of their absolute heartbreak at not having a relationship with their own family because of this. So I think
Here's our President County for Your Honor.
Thank you. Please be seated.
Tammy's family still wants to have that relationship with her children. And, they're holding out hope that
All right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'll note on the record, the jurors have returned and we are on the record. At this point, the court is going to read your instructions for this special sentencing proceeding. I've already read certain instructions and those will be included in your copies there. I will note that the numbers are generally out of order on these. Don't concern yourself with the ordering or if there are any gaps in numbers. These are the instructions you're to have in the way they are ordered by number. I'll also note that we'll have an original set of instructions for you in your deliberations. Please don't write on those or mark them up in any way, but you may make any notes if you wish on the copies you've been provided. So the instruction towards the middle of that packet I'm going to be starting with, where I haven't already read through, is labeled instruction number 5. And that's somewhat in the middle, following what I already read on instruction number 7. So instruction number 5 is as follows. You have now heard all the evidence in the case. My duty is to instruct you as to the law. You must follow all the rules as I explain them to you. You may not follow some and ignore others. Even if you disagree or don't understand the reasons for some of the rules, you are bound to follow them. If anyone states a rule of law different from any I tell you, it is my instruction that you must follow. No single instruction describes all the law that must be applied. You must consider the instructions together as a whole. In considering whether a sentence of death is justified, you shall not consider the race, color, religious beliefs, national origin, gender, or sexual orientation of the defendant or of any victim. You are not to impose a death sentence unless you conclude that you would do so no matter what the race, color, religious beliefs, national origin, gender, or sexual orientation of the defendant or victims may be. I have not meant by these instructions or by any ruling or remark I have made to indicate any opinion as to the facts of what your verdict should be. Instruction number 9. You have been instructed that the state has alleged the statutory aggravating circumstance that the murder was committed for remuneration or the promise of remuneration, or the defendant employed another to commit the murder for remuneration or the promise of remuneration. In order to find the defendant guilty of this statutory aggravating circumstance, you must unanimously find, beyond a reasonable doubt, remuneration was a motive, reason, or impetus for the murder and not merely the result of the murder. Remuneration means payment or compensation. Instruction number 10. You have been instructed that the state has alleged the statutory aggravating circumstance that the murder was especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel, manifesting exceptional depravity. In order to find the defendant guilty of this statutory aggravating circumstance, you must unanimously find, beyond a reasonable doubt, that the murder was especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel, manifesting exceptional depravity. The terms especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel are considered separately, but in combination with manifesting exceptional depravity. The terms heinous, atrocious, or cruel are intended to refer to those first-degree murders where the actual commission of the first-degree murder was accomplished by such additional acts as to set the crime apart from the norm of first-degree murders. A murder is heinous if it is extremely wicked or shockingly evil. Atrocious means outrageously wicked and vile. Cruel means designed to inflict a high degree of pain with utter indifference to or even enjoyment of the suffering of others.
Yep. Check.
This statutory aggravating circumstance does not exist unless the murder was especially heinous, especially atrocious, or especially cruel, and such heinousness, atrociousness, or cruelty manifested exceptional depravity. It might be thought that every murder involves depravity. However, exceptional depravity exists only where depravity is apparent to such an extent as to obviously offend all standards of morality and intelligence. The terms especially heinous, manifesting exceptional depravity, especially atrocious, manifesting exceptional depravity, or especially cruel, manifesting exceptional depravity, focus upon a defendant's state of mind at the time of the offense as reflected by his words and acts. Instruction number 11. You have been instructed that the state has alleged the statutory aggravating circumstance that the murder or circumstances surrounding its commission, the defendant exhibited utter disregard for human life. In order to find the defendant guilty of this statutory aggravating circumstance, you must unanimously find, beyond a reasonable doubt, that by the murder or circumstances surrounding its commission, the defendant exhibited utter disregard for human life. Exhibited utter disregard for human life with regard to the murder or the circumstances surrounding its commission refers to acts or circumstances surrounding the crime that exhibit the highest, the utmost callous disregard for human life, i.e., the cold-blooded, pitiless slayer.
Yep.
Cold-blooded means marked by absence of warm feeling, without consideration, compunction, or clemency, matter of fact or emotionless. Pitiless means devoid of or unmoved by mercy or compassion. A cold-blooded, pitiless slayer refers to a slayer who kills without feeling or sympathy. The utter disregard factor refers to the defendant's lack of conscience regarding killing another human being.
Bless your heart, Great Dane Mom.
Instruction number 12. You have been instructed that the state has alleged the statutory aggravating circumstance that the defendant, by his conduct, whether such conduct was before, during, or after the commission of the murder at hand, has exhibited a propensity to commit murder, which will probably constitute a continuing threat to society. In order to find the defendant guilty of this statutory aggravating circumstance, you must unanimously find, beyond a reasonable doubt, that the defendant, by his conduct, whether such conduct was before, during, or after the commission of the murder at hand, has exhibited a propensity to commit murder, which will probably constitute a continuing threat to society. The phrase exhibited a propensity to commit murder, which will probably constitute a continuing threat to society, means conduct showing that the defendant is more likely than not to be a continuing threat to society. You may consider conduct that occurred before, during, or after the commission of the murder you have already found the defendant guilty of in this case. However, a finding that the defendant has a propensity to commit murder, which will probably constitute a continuing threat to society, cannot be based solely upon the fact that you found the defendant guilty of murder. In order for a person to have a propensity to commit murder, the person must be a willing, predisposed killer, a killer who tends toward destroying the life of another, one who kills with less than the normal amount of provocation. Propensity requires a proclivity, a susceptibility, and even an affinity toward committing the act of murder. Instruction number 16. The state has alleged more than one statutory aggravating circumstance in this case. You must consider whether the state has proven the existence of more than one statutory aggravating circumstance beyond a reasonable doubt by relying on the same facts or independent facts. The same facts, without more, cannot be relied on to find more than one statutory aggravating circumstance beyond a reasonable doubt. Independent facts must exist for each statutory aggravating circumstance in order for you to find that the state has proven multiple statutory aggravating circumstances beyond a reasonable doubt. Instruction number 14. I have outlined for you the rules of law applicable to this case and have told you of some of the matters which you may consider in weighing the evidence. In a few minutes, counsel will present their closing remarks to you, and then you will retire to the jury room for your deliberations. The arguments and statements of the attorneys are not evidence. If you remember the facts differently from the way the attorneys have stated them, you should base your decision on what you remember. The attitude and conduct of jurors at the beginning of your deliberations are important. It is rarely productive at the outset for you to make an emphatic expression of your opinion on the case or state how you intend to vote. When you do that at the beginning, your sense of pride may be aroused and you may hesitate to change your position. Remember that you are not partisans or advocates, but you are judges. As jurors, you have a duty to consult with one another and to deliberate before making your individual decisions. You may fully and fairly discuss among yourselves all of the evidence you have heard and seen in this courtroom about the case together with the law that relates to this case as contained in these instructions. During your deliberations, you each have a right to re-examine your own views and change your opinions. You should only do so if you are convinced by fair and honest discussion that your original opinion has changed based upon the evidence and the law as given you in these instructions. Consult with one another, consider each other's views, and deliberate with the objective of reaching an agreement if you can do so without disturbing your individual judgment. Each of you must decide the case for yourself, but you should do so only after a discussion and consideration of the case with your fellow jurors. However, none of you should surrender your honest opinion as to the weight or effect of evidence because the majority of the jury feels otherwise, or for the purpose of returning a verdict. Instruction number 15. In reaching your verdict, you must first decide whether the state has proven beyond a reasonable doubt that any of the statutory aggravating circumstances exist. You must consider each of the alleged statutory aggravating circumstances. Your decision that each statutory aggravating circumstance exists must be unanimous. If you find that the state has failed to prove the existence of any statutory aggravating circumstance, or if you are unable to unanimously agree on that issue, then you must so indicate on the verdict form. If the state has failed to prove the existence of any statutory aggravating circumstance, you need not deliberate further. Merely notify the bailiff that you are done. The judge must then sentence the defendant to life in prison, and the judge must set a fixed period of imprisonment of at least 10 years during which the defendant will not be eligible for parole. If you unanimously find that the state has proven the existence of a statutory aggravating circumstance, then you must so indicate on the verdict form. You must also then consider whether any mitigating circumstances exist to make that imposition of the death penalty unjust. If you find that all mitigating circumstances are sufficiently compelling to make the imposition of the death penalty unjust, or you cannot unanimously agree on that issue, then the defendant will be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. A life sentence without possibility of parole under Idaho law means that a person must spend the rest of his or her natural life in prison. If you find that all mitigating circumstances are not sufficiently compelling to make the imposition of the death penalty unjust, then the defendant will be sentenced to death. You must decide for yourself whether all mitigating factors presented, when weighed against each statutory aggravating circumstance proven by the state, are sufficiently compelling to make the imposition of the death penalty unjust. You do not have to unanimously agree upon what mitigating circumstances exist. The existence of mitigating factors need not be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. You must each decide for yourselves whether mitigating circumstances exist, and if so, then consider them in your individual weighing process. Once you have reached a unanimous decision on whether all mitigating circumstances, when weighed against each aggravating circumstance, make the imposition of the death penalty unjust, or if you cannot unanimously agree on that issue, then you must indicate on the verdict form and notify the bailiff that you are done. All right, that concludes the instructions. As I mentioned, there will be a conforming verdict form that will be submitted for the jury foreperson as well. And the jury foreperson is to remain as the same foreperson that had that role during the guilt phase of the trial. So counsel, at this time, then that concludes the court's instructions to the jurors. If the state would like to begin with a closing, you may do so at this time.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay.
And Your Honor, if I may have use of the HDMI.
Yes. Ms. Blake, I'll just inquire on the record, but are there going to be any graphic images in this?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, labeling someone dark, lowering their death percentage, marking them for death. What is the appropriate measure of justice? On August 12th of 2019, Lori switched Tylee's Social Security payments to go into her sole, meaning Lori's sole, BBVA account. The first payment was deposited on August 28th of 2019. Less than 2 weeks later, Tylee was dead. On September 18th of 2019, Lori received the first payments associated with the Social Security that she and JJ were receiving because of Charles' death. Just 5 days later, JJ Vallow was dead. Lori found out that she was not going to get the $1 million life insurance policy on Charles around July 11th of 2019, and she messaged Chad to let him know that. But remember what she told Chad, I'll still get the $4,000 in Social Security. On September 8th of 2019, Tammy's life insurance was increased. Chad signed off on that application. Tammy was dead just a little over a month later, while the attempted shooting was almost 1 month to the day that she upped her life insurance. Remember, the multiple messages relaying the plan is for Chad and Lori to be together, alone on a beach, unencumbered by telestial obstacles. Unencumbered by earthly obstacles. Chad formed the plan. That plan included manipulating those around him to ensure that he could end up on a tropical island with Lori Vallow, who eventually became Lori Vallow Daybell. She was a woman that he deemed to have perfect proportions and to be a goddess. But in order to fund a new lifestyle, living on a tropical island and spending all your time with your new goddess lover, how do you fund that lifestyle? And how do you remove the obstacles to getting there? First, Chad taught others that he could determine whether someone was dark and or possessed. Second, he taught others that if someone was possessed or too dark, then the body had to be destroyed or die to free the person. Third, he started teaching those around him that he could determine death percentages. Essentially, this meant that Chad could mark someone for death and determine when it was their time to go. He exhibited that power to those around him. He exhibited that power of his self-proclaimed visions to those who believed him and followed him. When we talk about if the murders were committed for remuneration or financial gain, the defendant received $430,000 in life insurance money after Tammy's death. Money that was used to fund his life in Hawaii with Lori. Lori continued to receive the Social Security payments from the kids whose bodies were hidden on Chad's property so that they could continue to receive those Social Security payments. The murder was especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel, manifesting exceptional depravity. What else could these murders be? Tylee, unknown cause of death. Because of her body being burned so severely, there were charred bones, remains in a melted green bucket. JJ, cause of death, plastic bag, asphyxiation by a plastic bag over his head. Not only that, but he had tape over his mouth, a plastic bag over his head, tape around that bag, his arms duct taped from elbow to elbow, and then placed in a black garbage bag. He also had scratches on his neck.
Vicious.
And you saw the last known video of JJ. Those scratches don't appear to be there. Tammy, cause of death by asphyxiation, manner, homicide. Tammy killed in her own home, a place where she should have felt safe. Her life extinguished. By the murder, the defendant exhibited utter disregard for human life. Tylee was only 16 years old. JJ only 7 years old. Tammy, a 49-year-old mother of 5. The mother of the defendant's kids. It didn't matter the age of the victim or who relied on them and loved them. If they were in the way of Chad and his plan, and or if there was money to be gained for Lori and Chad, those individuals were marked for death. The defendant, by prior conduct or conduct in the murder at hand, has exhibited a potential to commit murder, which will probably constitute a continuing threat to society. Again, 3 victims killed, all at different times. Again, the defendant determining who was possessed, determining the death percentages, and once again, the defendant determining when it was their time to go. And Alex Cox believing and trusting Chad 100%. Alex said shortly before his death, "I am worried I am going to be their fall guy." Another statement he made, either I am a man of God or I am not. Lori, when asked about believing Chad, if Chad is a Satan, he sure is a good one. Chad told more people than just Lori and Alex about people being dark. You heard of other people that were labeled as dark by Chad, including 12-year-old kids. The only difference is it was only those that stood in his way of his plan or who there was going to be financial gain from that ended up dead. Ladies and gentlemen, you will decide what justice is. At every stage of the development of the plan that resulted in the death of Tylee and her body being burnt, with parts still missing, the death of JJ wrapped in plastic bags and duct tape and discarded in Chad's yard, the death of Tammy Daybell, who had her ability to breathe, to live, suppressed. Tylee was last seen on September 8th of 2019. JJ was last seen on September 22nd of 2019. Then Tammy was discovered deceased in her home, October 19th, 2019.
My name is Tammy Daybell.
At any point between these deaths, the defendant could have stopped, but he didn't. He continued to rate people as dark and zombies. He continued to determine death percentages, and he continued to move forward with his plan to ensure that he was on a beach with Lori Vallow, unencumbered by earthly relatives, earthly obstacles. Ladies and gentlemen, we ask you to consider what is just in this case in rendering your decision. Thank you.
Is Pryor gonna get up and what could he
All right, thank you. At this time,
possibly
the
say?
defense may present a closing if you wish, Mr. Pryor.
What could he possibly say?
Permission to, Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to go back to the indictment in this case. And the indictment accused Chad Daybell of espousing religious beliefs. And if you go back and look at the indictment, it talks one of the overt acts was espousing the religious beliefs to justify a killing. One of the other overt acts is that they claim that Chad did a south-southwest wind direction. And if you look back at the indictment, you'll see that all of the other overt acts, every one of them dealt with, as far as JJ and Tylee are concerned, dealt with actions by Lori Vallow. When we talk about remuneration, let's go back and do a little history lesson.
Remunerate.
Let's talk about Joseph Ryan. Before Chad ever knew Lori Vallow, the plan was set for Joseph Ryan and Lori to collect the insurance, the life insurance proceeds. The plan was already in place before Chad was ever even in the picture. And then we get the plan with Charles Vallow. And then I know I spoke to you at the time of my closing about Chad Daybell and the insurance for, that Lori was claiming to get on Chad. If you've made your decision, but if you look at the indictment, the allegations with Chad Daybell are not about remuneration or money. The allegations with Chad Daybell were allegedly religious beliefs and espousing religious beliefs. And the time we spent on the screen was about religious beliefs that he claimed to have had and that he espoused. This had nothing to do with money. Nothing to do with money. The insurance on Tammy Daybell, the $300,000 was set in 2002. And the state cannot allege that in 2002, Chad Daybell had some plan to collect insurance.
Oh, stop
When
it.
you look at the documents of the upping in the insurance, Tammy Daybell upped her insurance because it was relatively cheap. But the reason Chad Daybell signed that document and signed off is because he was also getting $20,000 insurance. And the only reason he had to sign was because if you listen to what the real estate or the insurance folks said, is if he's getting insurance as well on himself, he has to sign. This has nothing to do with money. You found that there was murders.
Oh, come on.
And I want you to read the statute and the direction and the directions and what the judge has presented to you as what you have to find in terms of atrocious conduct. And the judge specifically said there that if you find that there was a murder, that's not enough. You have to go beyond bounds of human decency. And if you look back at this case, if you recall, Chad Daybell was never present for the actual murder of Tylee Ryan. Chad Daybell was never
You don't
present.
know that. You don't know
There were
that.
many other people present for the murder of JJ Vallow. And whether you believe or not that Chad Daybell suffocated Tammy Daybell, and it's as tragic as that is, that doesn't reach the heinous, atrocious conduct that's defined by what the judge is instructing you.
What an
And at
idiot.
this point, folks, I'm going to ask you to find that there was no conduct that rose to the level that the state is trying to present at this point. Thank you.
He said that thing, and I think the looks on their faces after he said, as heinous as that was, it's not
All right,
that
that concludes
bad.
the closing of the defense.
Yeah,
Does the
fuck
state wish
you.
to present any brief rebuttal closing?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Very well.
Lindsay's like, you
That'll
dug your own
conclude the
grave.
special sentencing proceeding then. In terms of presentation of evidence and argument, the next matter then is the jurors will again retire to deliberate on these questions posed to them in these proceedings. I am going to, although already sworn, again for the special proceeding, I'll have the bailiffs who will be holding the jurors during the deliberations. If you'd please come forward, I'm going to have the clerk administer the oath to you in terms of the deliberation. So Madam Clerk, if you would please do that at this time.
You solemnly swear or affirm that you will keep this jury together in some quiet and convenient place, that you will not suffer any communication to be made to them, nor make any communication to them yourself on any subject connected with the trial of this case, except to ask if they have agreed upon a verdict.
In
and
other
upon
words,
their
don't
agreeing
be a
upon a
Becky
verdict,
Hill.
will return them into open court or upon the order of the court, so help you God.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk, and thank you to the bailiffs here. Court will note, of course, that's the original 12 jurors who returned the verdict in this case that will further deliberate on this. And for the alternates, we very much appreciate your continued patience while we work through these processes. At this time then, if all will rise, we'll begin deliberations.
All right.
Well, they're off to deliberate, and it looks like most of you in the poll, excuse me, hold on. Most of you in the poll
All right, we'll
believe
be in recess.
that it'll take 1 to 2 hours. I'm of that mindset as well. I mean, it feels like since they came back so quickly with the guilty verdict, they should come back quickly with the death penalty, but it is a very heavy decision to make. So, they also have to fill out all kinds of paperwork and stuff. So I feel like it'll be in the 1 to 2 hour range, but so it is 2:00 their time right now. I would bet that they're gonna come back with a verdict today. So I'm going to be very, very, very closely watching this, very closely, to see if they come back with a verdict today. And I'm going to end this stream, and then if they come back with a verdict, please look out for your notifications. And some of you may or may not get notifications. So also just check out my page and be on the lookout for a scheduled live, or for a community post from me saying that the verdict is back, and we're going to get that as well. So it'll be nice if everything can get wrapped up today. I want to thank Great Dane Mom for bringing Doug, the Great Dane, I'm assuming, to the court. I hope that Doug is able to give a lot of comfort to the victims. And my heart very much goes out to all of the victims who spoke today, and the victims that we didn't hear. All the victims that we didn't hear from. Justice for Tylee. Justice for JJ. And justice for Tammy. So I will see you all soon. I really appreciate. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chopper. I heard you were running around talking about my channel. I appreciate that. Excuse me. Sorry, I have like frog in my throat and a little bit of cry voice, but more of it is my sore throat. But be on the lookout. Please remember to hit the like button. Thank you for being here. And please take care of yourselves. That was very heavy. That was really heavy to sit through. But also in a way satisfying to hear the victims finally get to say what they needed to say. All right. I will see you soon. Hopefully today with this verdict. All right. Bye-bye.